Hi, I'm Emma. I was filled with excitement as I packed for what I thought would be an amazing family trip with my husband Tom and his family. It was meant to be our first trip together since getting married, and I was excited to join a tradition his family had been doing for years. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Sandra, had always been a bit distant ever since Tom moved in with me, but I hoped this trip would be a chance to finally get closer to her. As I zipped up my suitcase, Tom reassured me, "Don't worry, Emma, everything's taken care of. Mom and Dad always cover the trip expenses for everyone." But, the day before we were set to leave, Sandra asked me to join her in the kitchen for a quick chat. Her tone was casual, but her words were anything but. "Emma, I know you're new to the family, and I just want to clear something up," Sandra said, avoiding eye contact. "You're not really family yet, so you'll need to cover your own expenses for the trip." I felt a cold shock run through me, but Tom said the family expenses were covered. I replied, confused. Sandra waved her hand dismissively. "Well, that's for family. I'm sure you understand. It's only fair since you're still new to this." I tried to keep my cool, though her words stung. "I see. Thanks for letting me know, Sandra." As soon as she left the room, I called Tom, my hands shaking slightly as I held the phone. "Tom, your mom just told me I'm not considered family and have to pay for myself on the trip. Did you know about this?" There was a pause before Tom responded, his voice filled with anger. "What? No, she never mentioned that. That's not right, Emma." We talked it over and decided we couldn't just let this go. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the unfairness of it all. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Sandra's words still weighed heavily on my mind. Tom squeezed my hand and said, "We'll figure this out, Emma, together." Little did Sandra know, we had a plan brewing, a plan that would show her we wouldn't be pushed around or left out. We were ready to take a stand, right in the heart of this family tradition. The next morning at the airport, things were about to take an unexpected turn. As we drove there, the tension in the car was thick. Tom kept glancing at me, his jaw clenched, eyes flicking between the road and me. I could tell he was just as upset as I was, maybe even more. He reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're not letting this slide, Emma. What Mom said isn't okay." I nodded, my stomach in knots. "I know, it feels like she planned this, telling me at the last minute." "Yeah," Tom agreed with a heavy sigh. "The timing is cruel." After a pause, he added, "Listen, I have an idea." I looked at him, my curiosity piqued despite the weight in my chest. "What if we just go somewhere else, just the two of us?" Tom said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We can still go to the airport, but take a different flight." His idea echoed in my mind. At first, I was surprised, but then a feeling of excitement crept in. Was he really suggesting we ditch the family trip and go on our own adventure? "Exactly," Tom said, his eyes lighting up for the first time in days. "Let's book a flight to San Francisco. We've talked about going there forever." San Francisco? I thought about it. It was a bold, spontaneous move. It felt rebellious, but also completely right. It wasn't just about escaping the family vacation. It was about reclaiming our own space as a couple. "Let's do it, Tom. Let's take back our honeymoon phase that she tried to ruin." Tom pulled out his phone and started browsing flights while I drove. We found a flight to San Francisco, leaving at almost the same time as the family's flight to Hawaii. With just a few taps, our secret getaway was booked. "We'll still go to the airport with everyone," Tom planned aloud, like he was solving a puzzle. "We'll check in together, but when it's time to head to the gates, we'll make up an excuse to split off. Maybe we'll say we're grabbing coffee or something." I nodded, the plan coming together in my mind. "And then we just won't show up at their gate, we'll go to our gate instead." "Exactly, and once we're on the plane, I'll text Mom. I'll tell her that since you're not considered family, we decided to do our own thing." It was simple, bold, and empowering. That night, as we packed our bags, the sting of Sandra's words still lingered, but the thrill of our upcoming adventure overpowered it. We were really doing this. The next morning at the airport, the usual pre-flight chaos buzzed around us. Sandra was busy handing out boarding passes, her voice loud as she went over plans for the trip, completely unaware of our secret. The family chatted excitedly about the beaches and activities in Hawaii, while Tom and I exchanged knowing glances. As we walked towards the security line, Tom leaned over and whispered, "Ready for this?" "More than ever," I whispered back, surprised by how strong my voice sounded. We were stepping into a new chapter, one where we weren't just following someone else's rules or expectations. This time, we were writing our own story. The airport was alive with activity, families, travelers, and crowds rushed about, each lost in their own plans. As we rolled our suitcases through the sliding doors of the departure hall, the air was filled with announcements and the excited buzz of people heading off on their adventures. Despite the chaos around us, I felt calm. We were finally doing something for ourselves. My heart raced with a mix of nerves and excitement as we walked through the airport, each step reminding me of the bold choice Tom and I had made. We stayed close to his family, blending in with the usual routines and the lively chatter about their vacation plans. Sandra, fully in vacation mode, was handing out itineraries and barking last-minute instructions, oblivious to the rebellion brewing right under her nose. "Everyone, remember, we're meeting at gate 24, Sandra called out, her voice carrying a note of authority over the noise. We nodded and responded without thinking, playing along as we prepared for our secret plan. The plan was simple, but bold. As we neared the security checkpoint, Tom leaned in and whispered, "Ready for the coffee trick?" I nodded, feeling both tense and excited. "Let's do it." After clearing security, the family headed straight for gate 24, but Tom gently tugged my arm, leading me toward a nearby coffee shop. "We're just grabbing a quick coffee," he called out casually to the group. Sandra barely gave us a glance, too focused on gathering everyone at the gate. Once inside the coffee shop, we waited until the family was out of sight, then made a quick, quiet exit in the opposite direction, heading toward a different part of the terminal. My heart pounded as we looked around to make sure no one from the family could see us. It felt like something out of a spy movie, sneaking through the airport with our own secret plan. When we found our gate, the relief was immediate. The departure screen confirmed our flight to San Francisco, and we finally sat down, feeling a little more at ease. Tom pulled out his phone, hesitating for just a second before typing out the message that would cut us off from the family vacation. "Mom, since Emma isn't considered family yet, we decided it's best to do our own thing this time. We're heading to San Francisco instead and we'll spend the week there. We needed to do what's best for us right now. I hope you understand." He pressed send, and just like that, the message was gone, marking a new chapter. We turned off our phones, choosing to silence whatever responses might come in the moment. The relief was immediate, but there was also an underlying tension, knowing we would have to deal with the fallout later. As we boarded the plane, it felt like stepping into a new world, a space where we could finally breathe, free from the expectations and disappointments that had weighed us down. When the plane took off, it felt like we were leaving behind the weight of the last few days. One chapter of our lives was fading behind us, while a new adventure awaited in the distance. Back with the family, the reaction was explosive. When Tom finally turned his phone back on, it buzzed non-stop with a flood of messages, confusion, outrage, disbelief. Texts from Sandra and other family members filled the screen, each one reacting to our decision. A mix of shock and accusations flooded Tom's phone. Sandra's messages stood out, sharp and filled with blame. "How could you embarrass me like this? This is irresponsible and utterly selfish." Her words stung, but as San Francisco came into view, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun reflecting off the ocean, the noise of the family's discontent felt distant. We were on our own adventure, one we had chosen together. Despite the turbulence we left behind, ahead of us lay a new path, full of our own choices and dreams. This escape wasn't just from an airport or a family vacation. It was a move toward finding our own moments of freedom. San Francisco welcomed us with its iconic fog and lively streets. We wandered through Fisherman's Wharf, laughing over clam chowder and sourdough bread, snapping photos beneath the majestic Golden Gate Bridge. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we had truly escaped. We were free to explore and enjoy each other's company, without the looming shadow of Sandra's disapproval. For those few days, our spirits soared as high as the city's famous hills. But even as we lost ourselves in the beauty of the city, Tom's phone continued to buzz with reminders of the storm we had left behind. He kept the details to himself, trying to protect me from the worst of the backlash, but I could see the tension in his eyes. Reality awaited us, heavy and unavoidable. When we returned home, it hit us right away. Sandra's car was parked outside, a dark cloud over what we had hoped would be a peaceful return. Tom squeezed my hand, silently bracing for what was to come. We hadn't even put down our luggage when Sandra stormed through the front door, her face twisted with rage and hurt. How could you two be so selfish to just run off like that? She snapped, her voice slicing through the calm we had gathered. Mom, we needed to do what was best for us. We felt excluded and unwelcome, Tom replied, his voice steady but clearly defensive. That's no excuse to humiliate me in front of the entire family. Sandra shot back, her hands trembling with anger. The argument escalated quickly. I tried to step in, hoping to calm things down. Sandra, we didn't mean to upset you, but... Don't you dare butt in, young lady, she interrupted, her eyes blazing with fury. You're the reason my son is turning against me. In a sudden flash of anger, Sandra lunged forward and slapped me. The sting of the slap wasn't just physical, it was the clearest sign of the toxicity we had been trying to escape. Tom immediately stepped between us, his face filled with outrage. That's enough, Mom. You can't just come here and attack Emma like that. The situation spiraled out of control. Sandra continued to hurl accusations, her voice rising with every insult. Tom had no choice but to call the police. By the time the officers arrived, the air was thick with tension and unspoken bitterness. After explaining the situation and showing the red mark on my cheek, we pressed charges. Sandra was taken away, still spewing anger and resentment. When the officers left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Tom and I sat down, the adrenaline slowly fading, leaving behind only exhaustion and a deep sadness. We had escaped for a moment, but reality had followed us home. We were no longer the same people who had nervously hatched a plan in an airport coffee shop. We had grown stronger, united by everything we'd been through and our shared vision for the future. Looking back, I realized that our journey wasn't just about escaping Sandra's toxic influence, it was about embracing our right to create our own family story, one built on love and mutual respect, things that were non-negotiable for us. This wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about moving forward into a life we had chosen together, a life where every new day was a testament to our resilience and our commitment to never settle for less than we deserved. As moving day approached, I glanced at the packed boxes around us, a symbol of our readiness for a fresh start. This wasn't the end of our story, it was the beginning of a bold new chapter. A chapter filled with hope, peace, and the promise of building something beautiful, on our own terms. As we closed the door on our old life, we stepped confidently into our future, ready to write our own narrative. And that's the end of our story, everyone. Now, I want to ask you, do you think it's justifiable to cut ties with family members if they continually disrespect your boundaries? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and you want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories. Let's keep the conversation going in the comment section.
The foreclosure notice lay crumpled on my parents' kitchen table, its red letters stark against the white paper. Mom paced the worn linoleum floor while Dad sat with his head in his hands, the weight of their financial troubles evident in the slope of his shoulders. $20,000, Mom repeated, her voice cracking. Where are we supposed to find that kind of money in 2 weeks? I took a deep breath, smoothing out the notice. I can help. They'd both turned to look at me, surprise and something else. Was it shame? Crossing their faces. At 32, I'd built a successful software consulting business, though they'd never shown much interest in understanding exactly what I did. Emma, Dad started. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. I interrupted. I'm offering. The kitchen was silent except for the steady drip of the leaking faucet. A repair that, like so many others, had been postponed due to lack of funds. The house I'd grown up in was showing its age. Peeling wallpaper, creaking floors, a roof that desperately needed replacing. What about your brother? Mom asked. Andrew should help too. He's the successful one. The familiar sting of comparison hit me. Andrew, the golden child who worked on Wall Street and drove expensive cars, but somehow never had money to help the family. Andrew, who could do no wrong even when he did nothing at all. Andrew's not here, I said quietly. I am. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed them the transfer I'd already prepared. $20,000, ready to move with a single tap. Mom's eyes widened. How do you have that kind of money? I told you my business was doing well. Though they'd never asked for details, never shown interest in my growing success, I can transfer it right now. Dad straightened in his chair. We'll pay you back, of course. No need, I said, tapping the transfer button. Consider it a gift. The notification chimed, confirming the transaction. $20,000, more than they'd ever believed I could earn, let alone save. Moving from my account to theirs. I don't know what to say, Mom whispered, tears in her eyes. Just promise me something, I said, standing up. Promise you'll stop comparing me to Andrew. Stop acting like I'm somehow less successful just because I chose a different path. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mom's face hardened, the gratitude vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. How dare you? She snapped. After everything we've done for you, you use this to try to make us feel guilty. That's not what your brother would never throw his success in our faces like this. I stared at her, disbelief mixing with a lifetime of hurt. I just gave you $20,000 to save your house. And now, you're using it against us. Mom's voice rose, just like you've always been jealous of your brother's success. Margaret, Dad said weakly, but she was too far gone. Get out, she screamed, pointing at the door. Get out and never come back. We don't need your money or your judgment. I stood frozen, the reality of what was happening slowly sinking in. I'd just given them enough money to save their home, and instead of gratitude, I was getting thrown out. Mom, please. Out. She grabbed my arm, pushing me toward the door. And take your money with you. We'll find another way. The transfer's already done, I said quietly, letting her push me onto the front porch. The mortgage is due in 2 weeks. Don't let your pride cost you your home. The door slammed behind me with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood there for a moment, listening to Mom's muffled sobs and Dad's attempts to calm her down. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. Heard Mom and Dad are having money troubles. You should help them out since you live closer. I laughed bitterly, walking to my car. Of course he'd heard. He always heard about problems, but never actually helped solve them. Another text came through as I started the engine. BTW, can you spot me 5? Investment opportunity came up. I turned off my phone without responding and pulled away from the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd just saved, the house I'd apparently never be welcome in again. But what my parents didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that their mortgage wasn't the only financial situation I was intimately familiar with. I'd been watching, learning, gathering information about the house, about Dad's failed business ventures, about Andrew's investment opportunities that always seemed to need family funding. And I'd been planning. Because sometimes being the forgotten child, the one no one pays attention to, means you see everything. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. I drove home to my quiet apartment, opened my laptop, and began typing an email to my lawyer. Phase 1 was complete, though not quite as I'd planned. Now it was time for Phase 2, and this time, I wouldn't be the one begging to come back. 2 weeks passed. My phone remained silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from Dad, not even an acknowledgement. that my money had saved their home. The only family member who kept in touch was Andrew, sending increasingly desperate requests for loans. I sat in my home office, surrounded by monitors displaying financial data, when Diana from my bank called. "Ms. Walker, there's been another attempt to access your accounts. Your brother again." I smiled grimly. "Let me guess. He tried to use Mom's maiden name as verification. And your childhood pet's name. Should I flag his attempts as fraudulent?" "Not yet." I leaned back in my chair. "Let's see how far he's willing to go." After hanging up, I pulled up the document I'd been working on. A detailed spreadsheet tracking every loan Andrew had taken from family members over the past 5 years. The total was staggering. Over $300,000 borrowed and never repaid. My intercom buzzed. "Your 2 p.m. is here," my assistant announced. Right on time, James Parker from the SEC walked into my office. He'd been surprisingly interested when I'd reached out about investigating certain investment schemes. "Ms. Walker," he said, setting his briefcase on my desk. "I've reviewed the documentation you sent. It's comprehensive." I nodded. 10 years of watching my brother scam family members tends to produce a lot of evidence. "This goes beyond family," James replied, opening his briefcase. "Your brother's been running an unauthorized investment operation, taking money from multiple sources, promising impossible returns. A Ponzi scheme," I finished. "I know. I've been tracking it for years." He looked up sharply. "Years? Why wait until now to come forward?" I turned my monitor so he could see the latest email from Andrew. "Emma, seriously need 50 by tomorrow. Huge opportunity. We'll pay back double in a month. Don't tell Mom and Dad. Because sometimes you have to wait for people to reveal who they really are." James studied the email. "Your parents, they're victims in this too." "They're his biggest enablers," I corrected. "They've remortgaged their house 3 times to give him money. The $20,000 I paid 2 weeks ago, that was to save them from foreclosure after his last sure-thing investment failed. And they don't know you're the one who reported him. They don't know anything about me," I said quietly. "They never have." My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Monthly mortgage payment due next week. Assuming you're handling it, since you offered to help." I showed it to James. "See? They threw me out 2 weeks ago, told me never to come back. Now they just expect me to keep paying." He shook his head. "We'll need statements from other victims. Family members who lost money. Already compiled." I handed him a thick folder. Statements, bank records, text messages. Aunt Sarah lost her retirement fund. Uncle Pete had to sell his business. Cousin Michael's kids can't go to college. And they're all willing to testify. They will be, once they understand what really happened to their money. My phone buzzed again. "Mom this time. Andrew needs help with an investment. If you can't support your brother, at least send the mortgage payment." James raised an eyebrow at the message. "Perfect timing," I said. "Ready to move forward?" He nodded, pulling out official-looking documents. "We can execute the warrants tomorrow morning." "No," I replied, checking my calendar. "Next week, Tuesday." "Why the delay?" "Because Monday is the monthly family dinner. The one where Andrew always announces his latest investment opportunity and collects more money." I smiled slightly. "I want him to have one last chance to show exactly who he is." After James left, I sat staring at my parents' texts. They hadn't bothered to ask how I was doing after throwing me out. Hadn't acknowledged the money I'd given them. Just demanded more, always more. to feed Andrew's endless schemes. My laptop pinged with an alert. Andrew had just booked a first-class flight to the Cayman Islands for next Wednesday. Right on schedule. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Mom. "I'll be at dinner on Monday." Her reply came instantly. "Good. Bring your checkbook. Your brother has an amazing opportunity to share." I forwarded the exchange to James, adding "surveillance team confirmed for Monday." "All set," he replied. "Recording devices will catch everything." I started typing an email to all the family members Andrew had scammed, scheduling it to send Tuesday morning. "I know what happened to your money. Come to my office at 2 p.m. if you want the full truth." A final text came through from Andrew. "Hey sis, got something big to discuss Monday. Bring that business brain of yours. And maybe a blank check?" "Looking forward to it," I replied. Because I really was. I'd spent years being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one they only noticed when they needed money. Years watching Andrew drain our family's resources while being praised as the successful son. Well, success comes in many forms, and sometimes it looks like finally exposing the truth. I opened my safe and removed the final piece of evidence. A recorded conversation from 5 years ago where Andrew admitted he was running a Ponzi scheme. I'd kept it all this time, waiting for the right moment. That moment was coming. Monday's family dinner would be one to remember, and Tuesday would change everything. I just hoped my parents would finally see the truth about their golden child before they lost everything trying to protect him. But even if they didn't, even if they never forgave me for what I was about to do, I knew it was the right thing. Because sometimes love means stopping people from destroying themselves, even if they hate you for it. Monday evening arrived with a sense of inevitability. I parked outside my parents' house, noting the new luxury car in the driveway, Andrew's latest purchase with other people's money. The SEC surveillance van was discreetly positioned down the street, disguised as a utility vehicle. I checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Emma," finally. She hugged me as if she hadn't thrown me out 2 weeks ago. "Andrew's got such exciting news." The house smelled of pot roast. Mom's specialty, always served when Andrew had a new investment opportunity to discuss. The familiar scent now carried a bitter edge. Dad sat in his usual chair, looking tired but hopeful. Andrew held court in the living room, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than our parents' monthly mortgage. "Little sister," he grinned, showing too many teeth. "Glad you could make it. Brought your checkbook." "Always prepared," I replied, patting my bag. Inside was indeed a checkbook, along with a hidden recording device sensed to the SEC team. "That's my girl," Dad said proudly, as if he hadn't sat silently while Mom kicked me out. Always a responsible one. Dinner was a performance of normalcy. Mom served her pot roast, making sure Andrew got the biggest portion. Dad asked about everyone's week, though he only really listened to Andrew's answers. I pushed food around my plate, watching the scene unfold like a play I'd seen too many times. Finally, Andrew cleared his throat. "So, family, I've got something amazing to share. Here we go. I've discovered an investment opportunity that's going to change everything," he continued, eyes bright with rehearsed enthusiasm. "Guaranteed returns of 40% in 3 months." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom beamed. "Sounds impressive," I said carefully. "How does it work?" Andrew launched into his pitch. the same one he'd used countless times, just with different numbers. Exclusive access. Limited time offer. Too complex to explain fully, but too good to pass up. I just need some capital to secure our position, he finished. Say, 50,000? I know it's a lot, but the returns. We can remortgage again, Dad offered immediately. Actually, I interrupted, I have some questions first. Andrew's smile flickered. Come on, sis. You know I wouldn't steer our family wrong. Like you didn't steer Aunt Sarah wrong, or Uncle Pete, or Cousin Michael. The room went silent. What are you talking about? Mom demanded. I pulled out my folder. I'm talking about the $300,000 Andrew has borrowed from family members over the past 5 years. Money that was never repaid. Money that was lost in guaranteed investments. That's different, Andrew protested. Those deals just needed more time. Like this deal. I slid a printout across the table. The one where you've already booked a flight to the Cayman Islands for Wednesday. His face went pale. Emma? Mom snapped. How dare you accuse your brother? It's not an accusation. I stood up, addressing the hidden microphones as much as my family. It's evidence. Evidence of a Ponzi scheme that's been draining this family dry for years. What evidence? Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. I played the recording from 5 years ago, Andrew's voice clear and damning. Of course, it's a Ponzi scheme. These people are too stupid to realize. Take their money, show them fake returns, use new investments to pay old investors. It's beautiful. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. Dad seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. You recorded me? Andrew snarled, lunging for my phone. The front door burst open. James Parker led a team of SEC agents into the room, badges displayed. Andrew Walker, James announced, you're under arrest for operating a fraudulent investment scheme, wire fraud, and multiple counts of financial elder abuse. No, Mom screamed, trying to block the agents. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, I said quietly, was enabling him for so long. Watching him destroy this family while pretending everything was fine. As the agents led Andrew away in handcuffs, Dad turned to me with tears in his eyes. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Would you have believed me? Over him? I gestured at the house around us. Every mortgage, every loan, every time you gave him money. I tried to warn you, but you never listened. We listened. Mom protested weakly. No, you ordered. Asked. Demanded. But you never listened. I picked up my bag. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'm meeting with everyone Andrew schemed. You're welcome to join us. Learn exactly what your golden child has done. Emma, please. Dad reached for my hand. We need you. No, I said softly. You needed me 2 weeks ago when I gave you $20,000. You needed me every time I tried to warn you about Andrew. Now you need to face the truth. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. I'll keep paying the mortgage. Not for you, but because this house shouldn't pay for Andrew's crimes. But don't expect anything else until you understand what real success looks like. The next day, my office filled with shell-shocked family members learning the full scope of Andrew's schemes. Aunt Sarah wept over her lost retirement. Uncle Pete raged about his sold business. Cousin Michael mourned his children's college funds. My parents sat in the back, silent for the first time I could remember. When the meeting ended, Mom approached my desk. We were wrong, she said simply. About what? Everything. She placed a set of keys on my desk. My old house keys. the ones I'd given back 2 weeks ago. Come home. I picked up the keys, then held them out to her. I am home. In the life I built while you were busy praising Andrew's lies. We can change, Dad said from behind her. Then prove it. I handed them a folder. Inside is a repayment plan for everyone Andrew schemed. Start there. Show me you understand the difference between flash and substance. They left with the folder, shoulders bent under the weight of truth. 3 months later, they'd stuck to the repayment plan, started attending financial responsibility classes, and finally started seeing me. Really seeing me. Andrew pled guilty, facing years in prison. The family members he'd scammed would eventually recover some of their money through asset seizure and my parents' repayment plan. And me? I kept my promise, paid the mortgage, maintained the house, proved that success isn't about big promises and flashy schemes. Sometimes it's about quiet strength, about doing what's right even when it hurts. Sometimes it's about being the child they didn't want until they needed exactly who you were all along. Mom and Dad visit my office now, actually asking about my business, finally understanding that real success isn't measured in fast returns and empty promises. And that house they almost lost, they've put it up for sale, downsizing to something they can afford without depending on anyone else. They're learning, growing, changing, and so am I. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong. It's in finally proving yourself right, even if it takes losing everything to find it. The foreclosure notice lay crumpled on my parents' kitchen table, its red letters stark against the white paper. Mom paced the worn linoleum floor while Dad sat with his head in his hands, the weight of their financial troubles evident in the slope of his shoulders. $20,000, Mom repeated, her voice cracking. Where are we supposed to find that kind of money in 2 weeks? I took a deep breath, smoothing out the notice. I can help. They'd both turned to look at me, surprise and something else. Was it shame? Crossing their faces. At 32, I'd built a successful software consulting business, though they'd never shown much interest in understanding exactly what I did. Emma, Dad started. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. I interrupted. I'm offering. The kitchen was silent except for the steady drip of the leaking faucet, a repair that, like so many others, had been postponed due to lack of funds. The house I'd grown up in was showing its age. Peeling wallpaper, creaking floors, a roof that desperately needed replacing. What about your brother? Mom asked. Andrew should help too. He's the successful one. I never planned to reveal my success to my family. For years, I let them believe I was struggling with my tiny shop while quietly building one of the largest financial empires in New York. But my sister Sophia's constant mockery finally forced my hand that Christmas night. The evening started like any other family gathering at my parents' Upper East Side townhouse. Designer outfits, expensive wine, and the usual competition over who had achieved more this year. I deliberately wore a simple black dress from Target, playing my expected role as the family disappointment. Olivia, darling. My mother's voice carried that familiar note of carefully masked disappointment as I walked in. We were just discussing Sophia's latest promotion at Sterling and Pierce. She's now Senior Vice President of Operations. I smiled politely, remembering the confidential documents on my desk, showing that Sterling and Pierce was actually one of my recent acquisitions, though that particular detail wasn't public yet. Congratulations, Sophia. That's wonderful. Sophia, impeccable in her Prada suit, barely glanced up from her phone. Thanks. How's that little vintage shop of yours doing? still making ends meet. If she only knew that the little vintage shop was just a front, a small piece of real estate I kept as cover while running Atlas Financial Group, a $50 billion investment firm that controlled nearly half of Wall Street's major players. But I just shrugged, maintaining my facade. We're doing fine. The tiny vintage clothing store in Brooklyn had started as a genuine business 10 years ago, right after I graduated from Harvard Business School. While my family pushed me to take a respectable position at a big firm like my sister, I had different plans. I used the store as my base, while quietly building Atlas Financial from the ground up. Just fine? My father raised an eyebrow, swirling his 20-year-old scotch. Sophia's division handled $3 billion in transactions last quarter alone. Maybe it's time you considered getting a real job, sweetheart. I'm sure Sophia could put in a good word for you at Sterling and Pierce. I'd get back a laugh, thinking about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow where Sterling and Pierce's board would learn about their new ownership. Instead, I said, "Thanks, Dad, but I'm happy where I am." Sophia snorted delicately. "Of course you are. Some people just lack ambition. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real business." The irony was almost too much. Just that morning, I had closed a deal worth more than Sterling and Pierce's entire market cap. But here I sat, letting my sister lecture me about real business. "Remember when Olivia actually went to Harvard Business School?" my mother added, shaking her head. "All that potential wasted on a little shop. At least Sophia made something of herself." The doorbell rang, interrupting what was sure to be another recap of my supposed failures. My mother brightened immediately. "Oh, that must be Marcus. Sophia, your boss said he might stop by, didn't he?" Marcus Evans, CEO of Sterling and Pierce, was indeed supposed to make an appearance. What my family didn't know was that he was here at my request, not Sophia's. After years of hiding my success, I had finally decided it was time for a change. The mounting takeover of Sterling and Pierce had provided the perfect opportunity. Sophia straightened her designer dress, clearly eager to impress her CEO. "Yes, Marcus mentioned he tried to drop in. He's been such a wonderful mentor to me." The household staff ushered Marcus into the dining room. He was exactly as I remembered from our board meetings, tall, distinguished, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. But while my family saw Sterling and Pierce's powerful CEO, I saw a man who now answered to me. Sophia jumped up immediately. "Marcus, I'm so glad you could make it. Let me introduce you to my family." But Marcus's eyes had already found me, and the look of recognition was immediate. He stepped forward, hand extended, completely ignoring Sophia's attempt at introductions. "Ms. Reynolds," he said formally, using my professional name. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." The room fell silent. Sophia's smile froze on her face. "Hello, Marcus," I replied calmly. "Merry Christmas." "Wait," Sophia interrupted, confusion evident in her voice. "How do you know my sister?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. "Your sister?" He glanced between us. "I apologize. I had no idea Ms. Reynolds was your sister. She's the CEO of Atlas Financial Group, our new owner." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. Sophia's face had gone completely white. And my father, he just stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Owner?" Sophia whispered. "That's impossible. Olivia runs a vintage clothing store." I smiled, finally letting my carefully maintained facade drop. "Actually, Sophia, I own quite a bit more than that, including as of tomorrow morning, Sterling and Pierce. The vintage store had been my cover for years, allowing me to build my empire away from my family's judgmental eyes. While they mocked my little shop, I was quietly becoming one of the most powerful figures in finance. Atlas Financial Group, named after my childhood fascination with Greek mythology, now controlled over $50 billion in assets. Sophia sank back into her chair, her perfectly maintained composure crumbling. But you run a shop in Brooklyn. The shop was a front, I explained, feeling a weight lift as I finally spoke the truth. I needed somewhere quiet to work while building Atlas. Somewhere no one would look too closely at what I was really doing. My father found his voice first. Atlas Financial Group. My God, they're behind half the major acquisitions on Wall Street. They just bought out Richardson Brothers last month for $12 billion. $13 billion, I corrected gently. And yes, that was us. My mother's hand flew to her throat, fingering her pearls nervously. But all these years, why didn't you tell us? I looked around the table at their shocked faces, remembering every dismissive comment, every mockery of my little shop, every comparison to Sophia's corporate success. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You were so convinced I was wasting my potential, so sure I was a failure. It was easier to let you think what you wanted while I built something on my own terms. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. I should mention that the official announcement about Sterling and Pierce goes out tomorrow morning. The board approved the acquisition an hour ago. Sophia made a small choking sound. You bought my company? Actually, I corrected her. I bought your company 3 months ago through a series of shell corporations. Tomorrow, it just becomes public knowledge. I turned to Marcus. I trust everything is prepared for the transition. He nodded quickly. Yes, Ms. Reynolds. All the paperwork is ready for your signature first thing tomorrow. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of shocked silence and awkward attempts at conversation. My family struggled to reconcile their image of me, the disappointing daughter with the little vintage shop, with the reality of who I had become. My sister barely spoke another word, her earlier confidence shattered by the revelation that her unsuccessful sister now owned her company. As I prepared to leave, my father finally approached me, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning respect. Olivia, I don't understand. Why maintain the pretense all these years? Why let us think you were struggling? I paused at the door, thinking carefully about my answer. Because, Dad, success isn't about impressing others or living up to their expectations. It's about building something meaningful on your own terms. And sometimes the best way to do that is to let people underestimate you. I stepped out into the cold December night, leaving my stunned family behind. Tomorrow, the world would learn that Atlas Financial Group had acquired Sterling and Pierce. Tomorrow, my sister would discover what it meant to actually work for me. But tonight, I had finally shed the weight of my family's disapproval, and it felt better than any business deal I'd ever closed. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of the changes I had planned. The vintage shop might have been my cover story, but it had taught me something valuable. Appearances can be deceiving, and the quiet ones often hold the most power. As I drove home to my penthouse apartment, another secret my family knew nothing about, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about revealing your true worth to those who never believed in you in the first place. The morning after Christmas, I sat in my real office, the entire top floor of a gleaming skyscraper overlooking Manhattan. The wall-to-wall windows offered a spectacular view of the city I now partially owned, a far cry from the tiny vintage shop in Brooklyn where my family thought I spent my days. My assistant Emma walked in, tablet in hand. The Sterling and Pierce announcement goes live in 10 minutes. Also, your sister has tried to call 17 times since 6 a.m. I smiled, remembering Sophia's face when she learned the truth last night. Any messages? Mostly variations of "we need to talk," and "you can't do this to me." Emma paused. Your parents have called too. Your mother left a message saying she's planning a family dinner to discuss this situation properly. Of course she was. In my mother's world, every crisis could be solved over an elaborate dinner party. But this wasn't something that could be smoothed over with fine wine and forced smiles. Ms. Reynolds, Emma interrupted my thoughts. The Sterling and Pierce board is waiting in the main conference room, and your sister is in the lobby. I straightened my Armani suit. No more Target dresses now that my cover was blown. Send the board up. Let Sophia wait. The next hour was spent finalizing the Sterling and Pierce acquisition. The board members, who had only known me as the mysterious CEO of Atlas Financial, now treated me with a mixture of respect and fear. They had no choice. Atlas Financial now owned 67% of their company. Finally, I nodded to Emma. Send Sophia up. My sister burst into my office like a hurricane in designer clothes. She stopped short at the sight of my expansive office, her eyes widening as she took in the elegant furniture, the priceless art, and the commanding view of Manhattan. This is impossible, she whispered. Clearly not, I replied calmly, not bothering to stand. Did you need something, Sophia? She whirled to face me, her composure cracking. Need something? You bought my company. You've been lying to us for years, playing poor little Olivia with her pathetic little shop, while secretly, building an empire? I supplied. Yes, I did. And I didn't lie. I just let you believe what you wanted to believe. But why? She demanded. Why hide it? Why let us think you were a failure? I leaned back in my chair, studying my sister carefully. Because you needed to. You, Mom, Dad, you all needed to believe I was less successful than you. It made you feel better about yourselves. That's not true. No. I pulled up some files on my computer. Let's see. In the past 5 years, you've mentioned my little shop exactly 147 times in family gatherings. Mom has suggested I get a real job 89 times, and you've used the words wasted potential in reference to me at least 50 times. Sophia's face flushed. You've been keeping count? I keep track of everything, Sophia. It's how I built this company. It's how I knew Sterling and Pierce would be the perfect acquisition. And it's how I knew exactly when to reveal the truth. She sank into one of my visitor chairs, her designer dress crumpling. So what happens now? Are you going to fire me? I smiled. Fire you? No, Sophia. I'm promoting you. Her head snapped up. What? You're good at your job, I acknowledged. Your division has shown consistent growth. I'm making you Executive Vice President of Global Operations. Hope flickered across her face. Really? With one condition. I leaned forward. You report directly to me. Every decision, every major move, it goes through me first. Think you can handle having your little sister as your boss? The hope in her eyes dimmed slightly. For the first time in our lives, the power dynamic had shifted completely. No more mockery, no more condescension. Now she had to answer to the sister she'd spent years looking down on. I'll need to think about it, she managed. Take all the time you need, I replied smoothly. The position is open until tomorrow morning. After that, I'll find someone else. She stood up shakily, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. As she reached the door, she paused. Olivia, that vintage shop. Why keep it? Now that everyone knows the truth. Because I like it, I said simply. It reminds me of where I started, and it keeps me grounded. Success isn't just about corner offices and billion-dollar deals, Safia. Sometimes it's about staying true to yourself, even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. After she left, Emma brought in my afternoon schedule. Your parents' dinner invitation. Should I decline? I thought about it for a moment. The old Olivia would have made an excuse, avoided the confrontation. But I wasn't hiding anymore. Accept it, I decided. But make sure they know I'll be coming directly from the office. Let's see how they handle having the real me at their dinner table. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and calls. News of the Sterling and Pierce acquisition had hit the financial world like a bomb. Atlas Financial Group was now officially one of the most powerful firms on Wall Street, and I was no longer the shadowy figure behind it. As I prepared to leave for my parents' dinner, I received one final message from Safia. I accept the position, but this isn't over. I smiled, slipping my phone into my designer bag. Of course it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. My family had spent years underestimating me, dismissing my choices, mocking my supposed failure. Now they would learn exactly what I was capable of. The vintage shop in Brooklyn might have been my cover story, but Atlas Financial was my true legacy. And now that my family knew the truth, it was time to show them just how far their disappointing daughter had really come. I stepped into my private elevator, heading down to where my driver waited. Tonight's dinner would be interesting. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less than I was. It was time for my family to meet the real Olivia Reynolds, CEO of Atlas Financial Group and owner of half of Wall Street. And something told me they weren't ready for what that really meant. My driver pulled up to my parents' townhouse precisely at 7. This time, I didn't try to blend in. My Channel suit and Louboutin heels announced exactly who I was. Not the daughter they dismissed for years, but the powerful CEO I'd become. The family butler, who now knew I could buy and sell this house 100 times over, opened the door with a deep bow. Ms. Reynolds, your family is waiting in the dining room. I could hear heated whispers as I approached. They fell silent when I entered. My mother, father, and Safia sat around the massive dining table, looking like they'd been caught plotting something, which, knowing them, they probably had. Olivia, my mother managed, her voice strained. You look different. Amazing what wearing your real clothes can do, I replied, taking my seat. No more Target dresses needed. My father cleared his throat. We've been discussing the situation, and we think. The situation? I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. You mean my success? My company? The fact that I'm now Safia's boss. About that, Safia cut in. I've been thinking about the position you offered. The position isn't negotiable, I said firmly. You either accept it on my terms, or you find somewhere else to work. Though good luck explaining to other firms why you left a promotion at Atlas Financial. My mother's hands fluttered nervously with her napkin. Darling, there's no need to be so aggressive. We're family. Family? I laughed softly. Was it family when you mocked my little shop for years? When you compared me to Safia at every opportunity? When you told everyone who would listen that I'd wasted my Harvard degree? We were trying to motivate you, my father argued, to push you to achieve more. No, I corrected him. You were trying to force me into your version of success. But here's what you never understood. I had my own plan. While you were focused on titles and appearances, I was building something real. The first course arrived, expensive wine, perfect salmon, all designed to smooth over family tensions. But I wasn't interested in pretending anymore. Do you know why I kept the vintage shop? I asked, watching them pick at their food. It wasn't just a cover. It was a reminder of what really matters. While you were all chasing status and recognition, I was learning about real value, about seeing worth in things others overlooked. But why hide it? My mother pressed. Why let us believe you were struggling? Because you needed to, I said simply. Your whole worldview depended on having someone to look down on. The successful parents, the perfect daughters Sophia, and poor struggling Olivia. It made you feel better about yourselves. Sophia flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone, opened my notes. Would you like me to read some of your comments from the past few years? The ones about my waste of potential? Or maybe the time you told your friends I was still finding myself while you were building a real career? Enough, my father interrupted. What do you want, Olivia? Money? Power? You clearly have both now. I set down my fork, looked each of them in the eye. What I want is acknowledgement, not of my success. I don't need your validation for that. I want you to acknowledge how you treated me, how you belittled my choices, dismissed my path, and made me feel less than because I didn't follow your script. Silence fell over the table. My mother's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her discomfort. My father's usual authority seemed to have deserted him. And Sophia, she looked lost, her world turned upside down. Finally, my father spoke. We were wrong. Yes, I agreed. You were. But you have to understand, my mother jumped in. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected her gently. You wanted what looked best to others. There's a difference. I stood up, smoothing my designer suit. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Atlas Financial is acquiring another firm, one that makes Sterling and Pierce look small in comparison. Sophia, I expect you in my office at 8 sharp. We have a lot of work to do. Olivia, please, my mother called as I turned to leave. Can't we just go back to the way things were? I paused at the door. No, we can't. But we can move forward if you're willing to accept me as I am, not as you wish I was. And if we can't, my father asked quietly, then you'll miss out on knowing who I really am, I replied. Your choice. I left them sitting there, surrounded by their expensive dinner and shattered assumptions. My driver was waiting outside, ready to take me back to my penthouse apartment. Rough night? He asked, seeing my expression. Actually, I smiled. It was perfect. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find Sophia already waiting. She looked different, humbler somehow, without her usual armor of superiority. I've been thinking, she said before I could speak, about everything you said last night. You were right. I gestured for her to continue. I was jealous, she admitted. Not of your success. I didn't know about that, but of your confidence, your ability to follow your own path without caring what anyone thought. I always needed their approval. And now I'd like to learn from you. Really learn, not just accept the promotion. If you're willing to teach me. I studied my sister, seeing for the first time not my lifelong rival, but someone who might actually be ready to grow. First lesson, I said, sitting down at my desk. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Over the next few months, things changed. Not dramatically. Years of family dynamics don't disappear overnight. But slowly, steadily, the relationships shifted. My parents stopped trying to micromanage my life and actually started listening when I spoke. My mother replaced her subtle digs with genuine questions about my business. My father began asking for my advice on investments. Sophia worked harder than I'd ever seen her, learning the real meaning of success. She still struggled sometimes with reporting to her younger sister, but she was trying. That counted for something. The vintage shop in Brooklyn, I kept it, spending Saturday afternoons there when I needed a break from being CEO. It remained my sanctuary, a reminder of where I came from and what I'd built. 1 year after that fateful Christmas dinner, I hosted the family holiday party in my penthouse apartment. No more pretense, no more hiding, no more uncomfortable digs about my career choices. As I watched my family mingle with New York's financial elite, I caught Sophia speaking to a junior analyst. My sister, she was saying, taught me that real success isn't about titles or appearances. It's about building something meaningful, something true to who you are. I smiled, sipping my champagne. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about showing them a better way to be right. The vintage shop's bell still rings every day, its small space filled with carefully curated pieces and stories waiting to be discovered. And 50 floors above it, in a gleaming office tower, sits the empire that proves success comes in many forms. You just have to be brave enough to follow your own path, even when everyone else thinks you're lost. As I looked out over the city lights that night, I realized something important. My family had spent years trying to fix what they saw as my failures, never realizing that their definition of success was what needed fixing all along. Now they knew the truth, not just about my business empire, but about the strength it takes to stay true to yourself in a world that constantly tries to make you someone else. And that, more than any amount of money or power, was the real measure of my success. The day we buried my father was unseasonably cold for October. I stood at the edge of his grave, watching as mourners placed white roses on his casket, each flower a testament to the lives he touched during his 63 years. My sister Olivia clutched her husband's arm, her designer black dress and perfect makeup a stark contrast to my simple attire. Even at our father's funeral, she had to make a statement. He should have had a will, Olivia whispered to her husband, loud enough for me to hear. Now everything's going to be so complicated. I closed my eyes, trying to block out her voice. Trust Olivia to think about money while we were literally standing over Dad's grave. But she wasn't wrong. The lack of a will would make things messy. Dad's successful construction company, our childhood home, his investments, everything was now in limbo. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood my family. I was the quieter daughter, the one who chose to become a high school teacher instead of joining the family business. Olivia was the star, the one who went to business school and worked alongside Dad since she was old enough to read a contract. Sarah. My mother's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood beside me, elegant even in grief, her silver hair perfectly styled. Come with me for a moment, dear. We walked away from the crowd, past the rows of granite headstones until we reached a massive oak tree. Mom's hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax in an old-fashioned way that was so characteristic of my father. "Your father wanted you to have this," she whispered, pressing the envelope into my hands. "Open it when you're alone. And Sarah," she hesitated, her eyes meeting mine, "whatever you read, remember that your father loved you." Before I could respond, she turned and walked back to the funeral, leaving me holding an envelope that felt heavier than paper should. I slipped it into my purse, my mind racing with questions. Why me? Why not Olivia? And why did Mom look so worried? The wake was held at our family home, a sprawling Victorian mansion that Dad had lovingly restored over the years. I watched as Olivia commanded attention in the living room, sharing stories about working with Dad, about how she was his right hand at the company. Our relatives nodded approvingly. Of course, Olivia would take over the business now. It was what everyone expected. "Sarah, darling," my Aunt Margaret approached, martini in hand. "I hope you're not too worried about all this. I'm sure Olivia will take care of you." I forced a smile, feeling the envelope burn in my purse. "I'm fine, Aunt Margaret. I have my own life, my own career." "Yes, teaching," she said with a slight grimace. "Well, it's admirable work, dear. Though your father always hoped you join the family business." I excused myself and escaped to Dad's study, the one room in the house that still felt entirely his. The leather chair behind his massive oak desk still held the impression of his frame. His reading glasses lay on a stack of contracts, as if he just stepped out for a moment. The envelope felt heavy in my hands as I finally pulled it out. The wax seal bore Dad's signet ring impression, the family crest he'd had specially made when the business took off. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and pulled out several pages of Dad's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the time has come for you to know the truth about our family's legacy and why I've worked so hard to protect you from it." I continued reading, my hands shaking more with each paragraph. The words on the page couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. But as I read further, pieces of my childhood began falling into place. Strange conversations I'd overheard, mysterious business meetings, and why Dad had been so insistent that I stay away from the company. A knock at the study door made me jump. "Sarah?" Olivia's voice called out. "What are you doing in Dad's study? The lawyers are here to discuss the estate." I quickly folded the letter and slipped it back into my purse. "Coming," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my mind. As I walked back to the living room, where our family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, was setting up his briefcase, I felt the weight of Dad's words pressing down on me. The truth about the company, about what Olivia had done, about why Dad had never written a will. It was all there in black and white. "Now," Mr. Patterson began, adjusting his glasses, "since Mr. Mitchell died intestate, we'll need to follow state laws regarding the distribution of assets. The company being the primary asset." I tuned out his voice, watching Olivia's satisfied smile. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Dad's letter had changed everything, and soon, very soon, our entire family would learn the truth about Mitchell Construction and the real reason behind Dad's sudden death. The afternoon dragged on as Mr. Patterson detailed the complex process ahead of us. Olivia took notes on her iPad, occasionally shooting me condescending looks as if to say, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything," if she only knew what was in that letter. Later that evening, as guests finally began to leave, Mom caught my eye from across the room. The look we shared spoke volumes. She knew what was in the letter. She knew that everything was about to change. I gathered my things and headed for the door, but Olivia stopped me. "Sarah, we need to talk about the company. I know you've never been interested in the business side of things, but we should discuss your shares. I'm thinking of buying you out. For a fair price, of course." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw what Dad had described in his letter. The ambition, the calculation, the absolute certainty that she deserved everything. "We'll talk soon, Olivia," I said quietly. "There's a lot to discuss." As I drove home that night, Dad's letter safely tucked in my purse, I couldn't stop thinking about his final words. "The truth will cost us everything, Sarah. But it's time for justice. You're the only one I trust to make it right." Tomorrow, I would start digging. Tomorrow, I would begin unraveling the carefully constructed lies that our family fortune was built on. But tonight, I would mourn my father, not just his death, but the weight he carried all these years, protecting me while watching his beloved company become something he never intended. The truth would indeed tear our family apart, but as Dad wrote, sometimes destruction is necessary for redemption. The morning after the funeral, I spread Dad's letter across my kitchen table, along with years of newspaper clippings I'd gathered overnight. The Mitchell construction story was one of local legend, how my father built an empire from nothing, transforming a small contracting business into one of the largest development companies in the state. But Dad's letter told a different story. The company's success, he wrote, came at a price I never intended to pay. When the accident happened at the Riverside project in 2018, I thought it was just that, an accident. But what I discovered in Olivia's files changed everything. I pulled up the news articles about the Riverside project on my laptop. 3 workers had died when a support beam collapsed during construction of a luxury apartment complex. The official investigation ruled it an equipment failure. Mitchell Construction paid the families handsomely, and the story faded from headlines. But according to Dad's letter, Olivia had known about the structural issues weeks before the collapse. She had received multiple reports warning about substandard materials. But instead of halting construction, she buried the reports and pressured inspectors to sign off on the project. "The evidence is in my private safe," Dad's letter continued. "The combination is your birthday. I knew Olivia would never think to try that. Inside, you'll find everything: the original reports, emails, and proof of the bribes. I spent the last 5 years trying to make it right without destroying our family's name. But after what I discovered last month about the new downtown development project, I can't stay silent anymore." My hands shook as I read the final paragraphs. Dad had confronted Olivia just days before his heart attack. The timing couldn't be coincidental. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. "Meeting with lawyers at 2 p.m. Don't be late like always." I stared at her message, remembering all the times she belittled me, dismissed me as the family failure, the sister who chose teaching over real success. If she only knew what Dad had entrusted me with. At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the Mitchell Construction headquarters. The 20-story building gleamed with success, our family name emblazoned across the lobby in gold letters. Employees nodded respectfully. They all knew the boss's daughters. The conference room was already full. Olivia sat at the head of the table, in Dad's old seat. Mom sat quietly beside her, while various lawyers and executives filled the remaining chairs. "Sarah, how nice of you to join us," Olivia said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We've already begun discussing the transition plan." I took my seat, noting how everyone deferred to Olivia. She had spent years cultivating this image of herself as Dad's natural successor. "As I was saying," she continued, The board has expressed full confidence in my leadership. Given Sarah's alternative career choices, we feel a clean transition would be best. We're prepared to offer a very generous buyout package. The family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, slid a document across the table. We valued your shares at $5 million, Sarah. Very generous, considering your lack of involvement in the company. I picked up the paper, pretending to read it while my mind raced. They had no idea about the safe, about what Dad had discovered, about what I now knew. Actually, I said quietly, I don't think I'll be selling my shares. The room fell silent. Olivia's perfect smile flickered for just a moment. Don't be difficult, Sarah, she said. You've never shown any interest in construction. What could you possibly want with shares in a company you don't understand? I met her gaze steadily. I understand more than you think, Olivia. In fact, I'd like to schedule a full board meeting for next week. There are some matters Dad wanted discussed. What matters? Olivia's voice had lost its smoothness. The Riverside project, for one, I said softly. And maybe we should talk about those irregularities Dad found in the downtown development plans. The color drained from Olivia's face. Mom gasped quietly. The lawyers exchanged confused glances. I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia said, but her hands were shaking as she shuffled her papers. I think you do. And I think it's time the board knew everything. About the reports you buried, the inspectors you bribed, and exactly what happened the day Dad died. Olivia stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. This meeting is over. Everyone out, except my sister. As the room cleared, I could feel the tension building. Mom was the last to leave, her eyes filled with tears as she looked between her daughters. When we were alone, Olivia's mask cracked completely. Where did you get this information? Dad left me a letter, I said, standing to face her, and a safe full of evidence. Did you really think he didn't know? About Riverside? About everything? You're bluffing, she snarled. Dad would never. The safe combination is my birthday. I cut her off. When was the last time you remembered my birthday, Olivia? When was the last time you thought about anyone but yourself? She moved faster than I expected, grabbing my arm. Listen to me very carefully, little sister. You have no idea what you're getting into. Take the money and walk away. This is your only warning. I pulled free from her grip. No, Olivia. You listen. Next week, I'm going to open that safe, and everything you've built on lies is going to come crashing down. I walked out of the conference room, my heart pounding but my steps steady. In my purse, my phone was already recording, capturing every word of Olivia's threat. Dad had taught me well. Always keep evidence. That night, as I sat in my apartment reviewing more of Dad's documents, my phone rang. An unlisted number. Ms. Mitchell? A man's voice asked. My name is James Torres. I was the site supervisor at Riverside before your sister fired me. I heard about your father's death. And there's something you need to know. I grabbed a pen, my hand trembling slightly. I'm listening, Mr. Torres. The day before your father died, he came to see me. He said he was gathering evidence, that he was going to make things right. He asked me to testify if it came to that. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. And would you? Would you testify? There was a long pause. Yes, your father was a good man. What happened to him? It wasn't right. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, thinking about the path ahead. Dad's letter had unleashed a storm that would destroy everything. Our family's reputation, the company he built, perhaps even our freedom. But as I looked at the photo of him on my desk, his kind eyes smiling at me, I knew I had to finish what he'd started. 3 families had lost loved ones at Riverside. How many more lives would be lost if Olivia's corruption continued? Tomorrow, I would visit the safe. Tomorrow, I would begin gathering allies. And soon, very soon, the truth about Mitchell Construction would finally come to light. The downtown offices were nearly empty when I arrived at 6 a.m. Only the cleaning staff and a few early bird employees roamed the halls. I took the executive elevator to Dad's private office on the top floor, my heart pounding with each ascending floor. The office remained untouched since his death. Family photos lined the walls, mostly of Olivia at company events, receiving awards, standing proudly beside Dad at groundbreaking ceremonies. Only one small frame held my college graduation photo, tucked away in a corner. The safe was hidden behind a large oil painting of the company's first building project. My hands trembled as I entered my birthday. 0 to 31 to 58 to 9. The mechanism clicked, and the heavy door swung open. Inside, organized with Dad's characteristic precision, lay folders upon folders of evidence, each one carefully labeled, dated, and annotated. But what caught my eye was a USB drive taped to the inside of the door with a note: security footage, my office, September 15th, 3 days before his death. I pulled out my laptop and plugged in the drive. The video showed Dad's office, this very room, from the security camera in the corner. Dad sat at his desk, looking tired but determined. Olivia stormed in, her face twisted with anger. The audio was crystal clear. "You can't do this." Olivia's voice crackled through my laptop speakers. "I built this company into what it is today." "You built it on lies," Dad replied calmly. "On corruption and bribes. Those families from Riverside deserve justice." "Justice?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "Where was your sense of justice when we were struggling? When we needed those first big contracts? You didn't care about cutting corners then." "I was wrong." Dad's voice was heavy with regret. "But this ends now. Tomorrow, I'm going to the board with everything." Olivia's next words chilled me to the bone. "No, you won't. You're going to take your heart medication and go home. And if you ever threaten this company again, remember, accidents happen in construction all the time." The video ended. I sat in Dad's chair, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just corruption anymore. This was murder. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Parking garage. Level B2. 10 minutes. Come alone." Everything in me screamed that this was a trap, but I had to know. I copied the USB drive, slipped one copy into my purse, and hid the other in a place Olivia would never look, inside the frame of my graduation photo. The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet. A figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar. "Mom, I've been watching the security feeds," she said quietly. "I knew you'd come to the safe eventually." "Did you know?" I asked, my voice breaking. "About Olivia? About what she did to Dad?" Mom's face crumpled. "I suspected. The night before he died, your father changed his heart medication. He said if anything happened to him, I should give you that letter. He knew Sarah. He knew what she was capable of." Before I could respond, elevator doors dinged. Olivia's voice echoed through the garage. "Well, isn't this cozy?" A secret mother-daughter chat. She wasn't alone. 2 large men in suits flanked her, their intentions clear in their stance. "I warned you to take the money," Olivia said, stepping closer. Now you forced my hand. Like you forced Dad's hand. I shot back. What did you do, Olivia? Switch his medication. Make it look like a heart attack? Her smile was cold. Prove it. Oh, I can, I replied, matching her tone. The evidence is already with the FBI. Dad's files, the video from your confrontation, everything. Did you really think I'd come here without insurance? The color drained from Olivia's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone. On cue, her phone buzzed. Mine too. Breaking news alerts flashed across our screens. MTCGEL construction under federal investigation. FBI raise ARTES. You didn't, Olivia whispered. I did. An hour ago, I met with federal agents. They're upstairs right now, seizing every computer, every file. It's over, Olivia. The sound of sirens filled the garage. Olivia's hired muscle melted away into the shadows. She turned to run, but Mom's voice stopped her. Enough. My husband is dead because of you. 3 families lost their loved ones because of your greed. Face what you've done, Olivia. Federal agents swarmed the garage, led by Agent Sarah Torres, James Torres's daughter. Poetic justice, I thought, watching them handcuff my sister. Sarah Mitchell? Agent Torres approached me. We found additional evidence in the office. Your father. He left a recorded confession about everything. He was building a case against the company, against your sister. He was trying to make it right. I nodded, tears flowing freely now. That's all he ever wanted, to make things right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of headlines. Mitsubishi Construction CEO, RRESTE, FORFRAUD, and MURDR, RIVERSIDE, QRAGDU. The 2 Rulichidi revealed. Mitsubishi family empire crumbles, ANISVADAL. The company was dissolved, its assets seized. The families of the Riverside victims finally received justice and the truth about what happened to their loved ones. Mom and I moved away from the city, away from the whispers and pointed fingers. We bought a small house near my school, where I continued teaching. Sometimes, healing comes in the simplest forms. A year later, I visited Dad's grave alone. The family name had been tarnished, our fortune lost, but something more valuable had been saved, the truth. I placed a single rose on his headstone and whispered, I did it, Dad. I made it right. As I walked away, I thought about that letter that had started everything. Dad knew that giving me that letter would destroy the company he built, tear apart our family, and expose decades of secrets. But he also knew that sometimes the cost of truth is worth paying. The Mitchell name no longer stood for power and success. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about greed, corruption, and the price of silence. But for me, it was simply the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. In my classroom, I teach my students about integrity, about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. I tell them that true legacy isn't measured in dollars or buildings, but in the choices we make and the truths we're willing to face. Olivia sits in prison now, serving a life sentence for Dad's murder and the Riverside deaths. Mom visits her sometimes. I don't. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. The last time I saw her, during the trial, she asked me why. Why Dad had trusted me with everything instead of her. Because, I told her, he knew I would choose justice over power. something you never understood. Now, years later, when people ask about the Mitchell construction scandal, I tell them the real story. Not about the money or the corruption, but about a father's final act of courage, entrusting his quiet daughter with the truth that would both destroy and redeem his legacy. Sometimes the most devastating secrets come in simple cream-colored envelopes, sealed with wax and love. And sometimes the strength to face those secrets comes from the most unexpected places, like a teacher who chose truth over fortune, justice over power, and peace over empire. I still remember the exact moment I decided to throw away my perfect life. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was staring at spreadsheets in my corner office at Goldman Sachs, my untouched dinner growing cold beside me. Another overpriced salad from the place downstairs. The same place I'd eaten at for the past 5 years. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Big news. Opening our 15th location next month. When will you finally join the family business? Time to stop playing with numbers and learn about real success. I looked at the photo he'd attached, him and my brother Anthony standing proudly in front of their newest Taste of Naples restaurant location. The same posed shot, the same forced smiles, the same mediocre Italian food that had somehow built my family's restaurant empire. Instead of responding, I took a bite of my cold salad and grimaced. Even bad Italian food would be better than this. My name is Sophia Russo, and I was living every Italian-American family's dream. Senior investment banker at Goldman Sachs at 28, making 7 figures a year, with a corner office overlooking Manhattan. My father should have been proud. Instead, all he saw was that I wasn't part of Russo Restaurants, the chain of Italian restaurants that had been our family's pride for 3 generations. Banking is for people who can't create anything real, he'd say at every family dinner. Anyone can move money around. It takes real skill to build a restaurant empire. What he never understood was that I did know about food. Real food, not the mass-produced pasta and sauce that made our family rich. Every vacation day I had, I spent traveling, eating at tiny local restaurants, learning about authentic cuisine. My apartment was filled with cookbooks, not finance textbooks, and every night I dreamed about cooking, not banking. But you don't walk away from Goldman Sachs, and you definitely don't walk away from it to start a food truck. At least, that's what everyone told me. That night, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the cold salad, maybe it was my father's text, or maybe it was just time. I opened my laptop and started writing my resignation letter. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office before the markets opened. "You're what?" Jake stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Sophia, you're on track for partner. 2 more years tops." I placed my resignation letter on his desk. "I'm opening a food truck." He started laughing, then stopped when he saw my face. "You're serious? You want to leave Goldman Sachs to sell hot dogs?" Not hot dogs, real Italian food. The kind my grandmother used to make before my father turned our family recipes into frozen pasta sauce. Jake leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "Look, if this is about money, it's not about money." I cut him off. "It's about creating something real." As I walked out of his office, my phone started buzzing. News travels fast on Wall Street, and by the time I reached my apartment, my father was already calling. "Have you lost your mind?" His voice boomed through the speaker. "I just got a call from Arthur Goldman himself. A food truck? You're throwing your life away." I let him rant, walking into my kitchen where my grandmother's handwritten recipe book sat on the counter. I'd spent years collecting her recipes, testing them in secret, perfecting them while my family thought I was working late at the office. "Are you even listening to me?" my father demanded. "Yes, Papa, I hear you. But for once, I need you to hear me." I opened the recipe book to her signature dish, pasta alla nonna, made with a sauce that took 3 days to prepare. I'm not throwing my life away. I'm choosing my own path. By becoming a street vendor? Your brother runs 5 restaurants by himself. We have 15 locations. We're opening 3 more this year. That's success. No, that's mass production. When was the last time you actually cooked anything, Papa? When was the last time you made Nana's recipes the way she taught us? Silence. Then, times change. You can't make money cooking 1 pot of sauce at a time. Watch me. I hung up and opened my laptop. 5 years at Goldman had taught me more than just finance. I knew how to plan, how to analyze markets, how to build something from nothing. I'd helped launch million-dollar companies with less planning than I was putting into my food truck. First step, I emptied my savings account. $200,000, enough to buy a top-of-the-line food truck and have operating capital for a year. Next, I pulled up the business plan I'd been working on in secret for months. Nana's Kitchen. Authentic Italian street food, made fresh daily, using recipes that hadn't been changed for mass production. My phone kept ringing. My brother Anthony, my mother, my aunts and uncles. Everyone had an opinion about my mental breakdown. I ignored them all and started making calls of my own. By sunset, I'd found the perfect truck, a barely used kitchen on wheels that I could customize. By midnight, I'd secured all the necessary permits and licenses, and by dawn, I'd mapped out every food truck location in Manhattan, analyzing foot traffic patterns, lunch crowds, and competition. 1 week later, I stood in front of my shiny new food truck, now painted in deep red with Nana's Kitchen written in gold script. Inside was a fully equipped kitchen, better than what most restaurants had. My grandmother's recipe book sat on the counter, ready to guide me. "You're really doing this?" I turned to find my mother standing there, looking worried. She was holding a container of what smelled like my father's mass-produced marinara sauce. "I thought you might need this," she said, holding out the container. "For emergencies." I shook my head. "No emergencies, Mama. Only real food." I opened my grandmother's recipe book. Remember how Nana used to spend 3 days making her sauce? How the whole house would smell like basil and garlic? That was before we had 15 restaurants to run. She sighed. "Sophia, your father built an empire by taking Nana's recipes and turning them into fast food." I started preparing for my first day, laying out fresh ingredients I had bought at dawn from local markets. He built what he wanted. Now it's my turn. She left without another word, taking her container of sauce with her. I watched her walk away, then turned back to my preparations. My first customers would be arriving in 2 hours. I'd love to say my first day was a tremendous success, that people lined up around the block for my authentic Italian food. The reality? I served exactly 12 customers, made $157, and had enough leftover food to feed an army. But those 12 customers, they came back the next day, and they told their friends. By the end of the first week, I had a small but loyal following. Office workers who were tired of the same chain restaurant lunches. Food enthusiasts who appreciated real Italian cuisine. People who could taste the difference between sauce that took 3 days to make and sauce that came from a factory. My father kept tabs on me through others, never visiting himself, but always asking about my little experiment. My brother Anthony drove by once, smirking when he saw me working alone in my truck. "Have fun playing chef," he called out. "When you're ready to admit this was a mistake, your office at Russo Restaurants is waiting." I ignored them all and focused on my food. Every morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. to start preparing. Every ingredient was fresh, every dish made to order. My customers didn't just get food. They got stories about the recipes, about my grandmother, about real Italian cooking. 3 months in, something unexpected happened. A food blogger discovered me. Her review went viral. "Forget everything you know about Italian food trucks. Forget everything you know about Italian restaurants. Nana's Kitchen is serving the most authentic Italian food in New York, and they're doing it from a truck." The next day, the line stretched around the block. I sold out by 1 p.m. Then came the write-up in the New York Times food section. Then Eater. Then Bon Appetit. Suddenly, my little experiment wasn't so little anymore. I needed help. I hired 2 assistants, then 4. I added a second truck, then a third, each one serving the same authentic recipes made fresh every day. 1 year after leaving Goldman Sachs, I had a fleet of 5 trucks and a central kitchen where we prepared our sauces and fresh pasta. My revenue was approaching $2 million annually, small compared to Russo Restaurants, but every dollar earned without compromising quality. I was working harder than I ever had at Goldman, putting in 16-hour days, but for the first time in my life, I was creating something real, something that would have made my grandmother proud. Then came the day that changed everything. I was working in one of my trucks when I overheard 2 customers talking about Russo Restaurants, about how the quality had gone down, about how the newest locations were struggling, about rumors of financial troubles. That night, I did what any good investment banker would do. I started digging. What I found confirmed the rumors. Russo Restaurants was expanding too fast, taking on too much debt. Their mass-produced approach was failing as customers demanded better quality. Their once mighty empire was crumbling. My father didn't know it yet, but his dream of 15 locations was about to become a nightmare. And I had a decision to make. I could watch my family's legacy crumble, or I could save it, on my terms. What I did next would change not just my family's restaurant empire, but the entire way we thought about food, family, and success. But first, I had a sauce to prepare. After all, the best revenge, like the best sauce, takes time to develop. And I had all the time in the world. The numbers didn't lie. Russo Restaurants was in serious trouble. Sitting in my small office above our central kitchen, surrounded by the aroma of slowly simmering sauce, I reviewed the financial reports I'd gathered. The empire my father had built was drowning in debt, bleeding customers, and running out of time. 5 new locations opened in the past year, each one performing worse than the last. Food costs skyrocketing because of their bulk buying contracts, customer satisfaction scores plummeting, and worst of all, a $50 million loan coming due in 6 months that they couldn't possibly pay. My phone buzzed. A text from Anthony. "Hey sis, how's the food truck life? Still playing chef?" I looked at the expansion plans spread across my desk, not just plans for more trucks, but for something bigger. Something that would change everything. Actually, I typed back, "I'm thinking about expanding. Want to get coffee?" We met at a small Italian cafe, not one of our family's restaurants. Anthony showed up in his designer suit, reeking of expensive cologne and desperation. He didn't know I could smell the fear on him. "So," he smirked, stirring his cappuccino, finally ready to admit this food truck thing was a phase. Your office is still empty. I took a sip of my espresso, properly made, unlike the automated machines in his restaurants. Actually, I want to talk about Russo restaurants. Specifically, about the Bronx location's 42% drop in revenue last quarter. His cup clattered against the saucer. How did you? Or the 3 health code violations at the Brooklyn location? Or maybe the $50 million loan that's coming due? I pulled out a folder. I may have left Wall Street, Anthony, but I didn't forget how to read financial statements. You've been spying on us? Public records, brother. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. I leaned forward. You're in trouble. Big trouble. He deflated slightly, his arrogance cracking. Papa says we can handle it. We just need to cut costs, maybe close a few locations. You need $50 million in 6 months, and your credit is maxed out. Cost cutting won't save you. I opened the folder, sliding over a proposal I'd spent weeks preparing. But I can. You? He laughed, but it sounded hollow. With what? Food truck money. With Nana's legacy fund. His laughter stopped. Never heard of it. You wouldn't have. I created it 3 months ago, using my Goldman Sachs connections. It's a private investment firm specializing in restaurant turnarounds. I watched his face as understanding slowly dawned. We have $2 billion in capital, and we're very interested in authentic Italian restaurants. Anthony's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the proposal. $2 billion. That's impossible. You've been running food trucks. I've been running food trucks, making connections, and building a reputation for quality food. Meanwhile, I've also been raising capital, analyzing failing restaurants, and preparing for this moment. I pulled out another document. This is a preliminary offer. We'll assume the debt, inject fresh capital, and restructure operations. Papa will never agree. He'd rather go bankrupt than give up control. Then you go bankrupt, and we'll buy the assets at auction. I stood up, leaving the documents on the table. You have 48 hours to discuss this with him. After that, we start buying up your debt on the secondary market. And trust me, Goldman Sachs remembers me very well. I left him sitting there, staring at the numbers that spelled the end of his world, or the beginning of a new one. That evening, my mother showed up at my central kitchen. I was in the middle of teaching new staff how to properly make Nana's sauce, just as she had taught me years ago. Your brother told us, she said quietly, watching me stir the sauce, about your investment firm, about the offer. I added a pinch of fresh basil to the pot. And your father is upset. Of course he is. His daughter who threw her life away now has the power to save or destroy his legacy. I handed her a spoon. Taste. She dipped the spoon in the sauce, and for a moment, I saw tears in her eyes. It tastes just like Mama used to make. That's because I make it exactly the way she taught us. Before Papa decided it was too expensive, too time-consuming to do it right, I turned down the heat, letting the sauce simmer. Every truck, every batch, every single day. We do it right. He's not a bad man, Sophia. He just wanted to build something big. I know, Mama, but he built it by sacrificing what made our food special. I wiped my hands on my apron. Now I'm offering to help him fix it, but it has to be my way. She nodded slowly. He wants to meet. Tomorrow night at the original restaurant. The original Russo restaurant, where it all began 40 years ago. Now a tired location in Little Italy, its once bright sign faded, its tables half empty most nights. I hadn't been there since leaving Goldman Sachs. Walking in the next evening felt like stepping back in time. The same red checkered tablecloths, the same pictures of Italy on the walls, the same menu that hadn't changed in decades. But now I could see what customers saw. A relic, not a destination. My father sat in his usual corner booth, an empty plate of pasta in front of him. He didn't stand when I approached. Investment firms. He spat the words like they tasted bad. Billions of dollars. This is how you respect our family's heritage. I slid into the booth across from him. I respect our heritage by making food the way Nana taught us. When was the last time you tasted your own sauce, Papa? Really tasted it. He pushed the plate away. We serve thousands of people every day. You can't make sauce 3 days at a time for that many people. Actually, you can. My central kitchen does it every day. Smaller batches, better ingredients, real cooking. I pulled out my proposal, and we can do it for all your restaurants. But things have to change. Change. You want to destroy everything I built. No, I want to save it. But not just the restaurants. I want to save what made us special. I opened my grandmother's recipe book, which I'd brought with me. Remember this? Remember how people used to line up around the block just to taste Nana's cooking? His eyes softened slightly at the sight of his mother's handwriting. That was different. Times were simpler. People still want real food, Papa. They're tired of mass-produced meals and artificial flavors. Look at my trucks. Lines every day, selling out by lunch. And we charge more than your restaurants because people will pay for quality. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the recipe book. The loan, he finally said, comes due in 6 months. You've tried every bank in the city. No one will refinance. I laid out the numbers. You're losing money on every new location. Food costs are up 60% because your suppliers know you can't negotiate. And your best customers are finding better options. Like food trucks, he asked bitterly. Like anywhere that still cares about quality. I pushed the proposal closer. I can save Russo restaurants. Keep the name, keep the legacy, but return to what made us great. Real Italian food, cooked with care. And I suppose you'll want to run everything. Yes. No point sugarcoating it. My firm will have controlling interest. You'll retain a significant stake, but operational decisions will be mine. He stood up abruptly, his face flushed. Never. I'll find another way. There is no other way, Papa. You have 6 months until the loan comes due. 5 months until suppliers start demanding cash on delivery. 4 months until you have to start closing locations. I stood too, matching his stance. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm offering you a choice. A choice? He laughed harshly. Between selling my life's work to my ungrateful daughter or going bankrupt. No. A choice between admitting you need help or watching everything you built get sold off piece by piece. I gathered my things. You have until Monday to decide. After that, we start buying your debt. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving him standing there among the empty tables and faded memories. Outside, one of my food trucks was parked nearby, the evening shift, serving dinner to a long line of customers. The next few days were silent. No calls from my father. No texts from Anthony. But I knew they were running the numbers. Realizing what I already knew, they had no choice. On Monday morning, my phone rang. The board wants to meet, Anthony said, his voice tight, to discuss your proposal. The meeting was set for Wednesday at their corporate headquarters, a fancy office building that had seemed so impressive when I was young. Now it just looked like another monument to prioritizing size over substance. I arrived early, dressed in chef's whites instead of a business suit. Let them see who I really was, not who they wanted me to be. The boardroom was full. My father, Anthony, the other executives who had helped build and nearly destroy our family's legacy. They all watched as I set up my presentation. But first, I had servers bring in lunch, dishes from my food trucks, made fresh that morning. Before we discussed numbers, I said, I want you to taste something. The sauce was made exactly how Nana taught us. 3 days, fresh ingredients, no shortcuts. They ate in silence. I saw the recognition in their eyes, the memory of what our food used to taste like before mass production and cost-cutting destroyed it. My father put down his fork, wiped his mouth, and looked at me. In his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before: respect. Now, I said, pulling up the first slide of my presentation, let's talk about how we save Russo restaurants. What happened next would change not just our family's business, but the entire way America thought about Italian food. But that's not where the story ends. Because sometimes saving something means completely rebuilding it. And I was just getting started. The transformation of Russo restaurants began at 4 a.m. on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after the board meeting. I stood in the kitchen of our original location, surrounded by my best food truck chefs and a very skeptical kitchen staff. Today, I announced, holding up my grandmother's recipe book, we learned to cook again. The executive chef, who'd been running this kitchen for 20 years, crossed his arms. We know how to cook. No, I corrected him gently. You know how to heat up pre-made sauce and boil factory pasta. Today you learn to make real Italian food. Over the next 12 hours, we made sauce the way Nana had taught me. Fresh tomatoes, not canned. Herbs picked that morning. Slow cooked, stirred by hand, tasted every hour. The kitchen staff watched, skeptical at first, then increasingly interested as the aroma filled the air. By dinner service, we had 1 batch of real sauce ready. I made an announcement to the dining room. Tonight, we're offering a special, pasta alla nonna, made from my grandmother's original recipe. Same price as our regular pasta, but limited quantity. We sold out in 2 hours. The next day, the line stretched around the block. But this was just one restaurant. We had 14 others to fix and a mountain of debt to deal with. My father, surprisingly, became my strongest ally. After that first night, after seeing customers' reactions to real food, something changed in him. He started coming to the kitchen early, watching us cook, even rolling up his sleeves to help. I had forgotten, he admitted one morning, stirring a pot of sauce, how it used to be, how Mama did it. Anthony was a harder sell. This is inefficient, he complained during a management meeting. We're spending 3 times as much on ingredients, 5 times as much on labor, and charging twice as much per dish. I cut in, sliding over the latest numbers. With full dining rooms and lines out the door. The transformation wasn't easy. We closed 3 underperforming locations, converted 2 others into training centers. I brought in my food truck teams to train restaurant staff, teaching them not just recipes, but the philosophy behind real Italian cooking. Every location got a complete makeover. Out went the checkered tablecloths and cheap wine glasses. In came elegant simplicity, open kitchens where customers could watch their food being made, wine lists curated by actual sommeliers. But the biggest change was in our central kitchen, or rather, its elimination. No more mass production, I announced 6 months into the transformation. Each restaurant makes its own sauce, its own pasta, its own everything. Fresh, daily, no shortcuts. The food critics noticed. The first review came from the New York Times. Russo Restaurants has undergone a miraculous transformation. What was once a chain of mediocre Italian restaurants has become a collection of authentic trattorias, each offering food that would make any Italian grandmother proud. Michelin stars followed. First one restaurant, then another. Our prices went up, but customers didn't complain. They were getting real food, cooked with care and passion. 1 year after taking control, we had fewer locations, but triple the revenue. The debt was paid off. Our suppliers were happy, and our staff turnover had dropped to nearly zero. Turns out people like working in kitchens that actually cook. But the real moment of triumph came during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. For the first time in years, the whole family was gathered around the table. My mother had cooked, really cooked, not just heated up pre-made food. "I have something to show you," my father said after dinner. He led me to his study, where a new frame hung on the wall next to his business awards. Inside was a food truck permit, my original one, from when I first started. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about everything, about you." I hugged him, smelling the familiar scent of garlic and basil that now clung to his clothes just like it had clung to Nana's. "We were both right, Papa. You built something big. I just helped make it good again." 2 years after the takeover, Russo Restaurants had become Russo and Daughter, my condition for the final rebranding. We had 10 locations, each one unique, each one excellent. The waiting list for dinner reservations was months long. My food trucks? Still running, still popular. I kept them as our research and development kitchens, testing new recipes, training new chefs, keeping us connected to the streets where real food culture lags. Anthony finally came around when he realized that quality meant both better profits and more respect in the food world. He now runs our chef training program, teaching new cooks the difference between making food and making memories. Last month, a young chef from our newest location asked me why we spend so much time and money doing things the hard way. I took her into the kitchen, showed her how to stir the sauce, just like Nana taught me. "Feel that?" I asked as she stirred. "That's not just sauce. That's tradition. That's family. That's love." She nodded, understanding, filling her eyes as the aroma of slowly simmered tomatoes and fresh herbs surrounded us. Later that evening, I found my father in the same kitchen, teaching another young chef how to make pasta by hand. His sleeves were rolled up, flour dusting his once immaculate suit. "You know," he said when he saw me, "I spent 30 years trying to make this business bigger. You spent 2 years making it better." I picked up a handful of flour, felt its texture, just like Nana taught me. "Why not both?" He smiled, really smiled, the way he used to when I was little and helped him in the kitchen. Why not both indeed? We're expanding again, but differently this time. Each new location has to earn its right to exist by maintaining our standards. No shortcuts, no compromises, no mass production. Every sauce made fresh, every pasta rolled by hand, every dish cooked with pride. The investment firm that started it all. Still going strong, still transforming restaurants, still proving that quality and profit can coexist. But that's not what I'm most proud of. Last week, I found my grandmother's recipe book in the kitchen of our original location. It was open to her sauce recipe, the pages stained with tomato and oil. the way a well-used cookbook should be. But it wasn't just her handwriting anymore. There were notes in the margins from our chefs, little tweaks and observations, the recipe evolving while staying true to its roots. That's when I knew we'd succeeded, not because of the awards or the profits or the waiting lists, but because we'd created something my grandmother would have been proud of. My father joined me in the kitchen that evening, putting on an apron like he does every day now. "Ready to make the sauce?" he asked. I smiled, reaching for the tomatoes. "Always, Papa, always." The food trucks still park outside our restaurant sometimes, a reminder of where this revolution started. And every morning, when I smell the sauce starting to simmer, I think about that scared girl who left Wall Street with a dream of doing food right. Turns out you can go home again. You just have to be willing to cook up some changes along the way. Last night, a food critic asked me if I ever regret leaving Wall Street. I led her into our kitchen, showed her the sauce bubbling in huge pots, the pasta being rolled by hand, the chefs working with pride and passion. "Banking taught me about numbers," I told her. "But this taught me about value. And those are very different things." She took another bite of her pasta, closed her eyes in bliss, and nodded. She understood. Because in the end, success isn't just about how much money you make. It's about staying true to what matters. In my case, good food and family legacy. Sometimes those things seem to conflict, but with enough determination, and maybe a food truck or two, you can find a way to make them work together. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some sauce to stir. After all, the best traditions are the ones you practice every day. And somewhere, I know, Nana is smiling. I adjusted my simple black dress in the mirror of my penthouse apartment, deliberately choosing the plainest outfit in my closet. The standard issue MacBook I'd bought specifically for family visits sat on my desk, its screen displaying a few basic digital art pieces. Nothing too impressive, nothing that would hint at the empire I'd built. The invitation to the Morrison family reunion sat on my kitchen counter, its gold embossing catching the morning light. Hosted, as always, at my sister Diana's mansion in the Hamptons. "Join us for a celebration of family success," the card proclaimed, making me wonder if they'd ever celebrate any of mine. My phone buzzed, a message from my CFO about our latest acquisition. "Contracts are ready, Maya. Morrison Tech's board just approved the sale. They have no idea Dreamscape Animation Studios is the buyer." I smiled, tucking the phone into my purse. 10 years of carefully hiding my success was about to pay off in the most satisfying way possible. The drive to the Hamptons gave me time to reflect on how I'd gotten here. Growing up in the Morrison family meant one thing: business was everything. My father, James Morrison, had built Morrison Tech from the ground up, turning it into a respected name in enterprise software. My sister Diana had followed perfectly in his footsteps, getting her MBA from Harvard and rising through the company ranks. And then there was me, the disappointment, the daughter who spent her time diddling in notebooks instead of studying business strategies. "Art isn't a career, Maya," my father would say, his voice heavy with disapproval. "It's a hobby at best, a distraction at worst." I remember the day I told them I was majoring in animation at art school instead of accepting my place at Wharton. The silence in our dining room was deafening. "You're throwing your life away," Diana had said, while our mother quietly dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, as if I'd just announced a terminal illness. What they didn't know, what I never told them, was that I'd also been taking night classes in business administration. While they thought I was wasting time at art school, I was actually building the foundation for something bigger than they could imagine. My first animated short film won a student competition. The prize wasn't much, $5,000 and some industry recognition, but it was enough to start. I used the money to hire 2 other artists, working out of my tiny apartment to create content for small businesses. That's when I discovered something interesting. The corporate world was desperate for good animation. Training videos, marketing materials, product demonstrations. There was a huge market for high-quality digital content, and very few studios that could deliver it professionally. Within 2 years, my little team had grown to 15 people. We incorporated as Dreamscape Animation Studios, with me using my middle name, Phoenix, on all the paperwork. Maya Phoenix, not Maya Morrison, became the name behind what would grow into one of the most innovative animation studios in the country. The family never knew, of course. To them, I was still just Maya, the struggling artist who occasionally sold a digital piece online or did freelance work for local businesses. Every time they asked about my career, I gave them just enough information to maintain the illusion. Diana's mansion came into view, its manicured lawns and perfect landscaping exactly what you'd expect from someone who measured success in square footage. Cars lined the circular driveway, all luxury brands, all making my deliberately modest Honda Civic look even more out of place. I parked at the far end of the drive, taking a moment to check my reflection again. I'd left my designer clothes at home, worn minimal makeup, kept my hair simple. Everything about my appearance had been carefully curated to maintain the image my family had of me. The struggling artist, the family disappointment. Maya. My mother's voice carried across the driveway as I approached the house. We were starting to wonder if you'd make it. I returned her air kiss, noting how her eyes quickly scanned my outfit, probably calculating its cost and finding it appropriately underwhelming. Traffic, I explained, following her into the house, and I had to finish a commission. Oh, someone actually paid for your drawings? The pause before drawings was subtle but deliberate. If she only knew that just yesterday, I'd signed off on a $50 million contract with a major tech company for a series of animated training programs. Instead, I smiled sheepishly. Just a small business website. Nothing exciting. The house was exactly as I remembered it from previous gatherings. Ostentatiously decorated, designed to showcase the Morrison family's success. Photos lined the walls. Diana at her Harvard graduation, Diana with the Morrison Tech Board, Diana on the cover of Business Weekly. The single photo of me was from high school, before I'd disappointed everyone by choosing art over business. The great room was already full of relatives when we entered. Conversations about stocks, mergers, and market trends filled the air. My cousin James was holding court near the fireplace, talking about his hedge fund's latest acquisition. Aunt Patricia was showing off photos of her son's new startup. And there, in the center of it all, was Diana, perfectly coiffed in what I recognized as a $12,000 Oscar de la Renta dress. Maya, she called out, her voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. I'm so glad you could take time away from your art to join us. She embraced me briefly, careful not to wrinkle her dress. You look, she paused, searching for a diplomatic word, comfortable. Thanks, I said, pulling at my target dress self-consciously, playing the part she expected. Your dress is beautiful. Oscar de la Renta, she confirmed, smoothing the fabric. A little celebration for closing our latest acquisition. Morrison Tech just bought out our biggest competitor in the enterprise software space. I bit back a smile. If only she knew that in less than 24 hours, Morrison Tech itself would belong to my little art studio. That's wonderful, I said. Things must be going well. Better than ever, she beamed. In fact, I was just telling everyone about our next big move. We're branching into digital content creation, animations for corporate training, marketing, that sort of thing. My heart skipped a beat. This was exactly why I'd moved to acquire Morrison Tech. They were planning to enter my territory, potentially becoming a major competitor. Instead, they were about to become part of my empire. Not that Diana knew that yet. Animation? I asked innocently. That sounds complicated. Diana laughed, the sound carrying across the room. Oh, Maya, it's all business strategy. The actual drawing part is just technical work. We'll hire people for that. People like, she gestured vaguely in my direction. Well, Other relatives had drifted over, drawn by Diana's laugh. Still drawing cartoons, Maya? My cousin James asked, not bothering to hide his smirk. My fund is always looking for administrative assistants if you want a real job. Thank you, I said quietly. But I'm doing okay with my art. Okay? Diana raised an eyebrow. Is that why you're still driving that old Honda? Still living in that tiny apartment? They had no idea that I owned the entire building where my tiny apartment was located, or that my car collection included a Porsche and 2 Teslas. The Honda was just for family visits. I get by. I shrugged. Not everyone needs a mansion. Getting by isn't the same as succeeding. My father's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me with that familiar look of disappointment. Diana's latest deal is worth more than you'll probably make in your entire life drawing pictures. I felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. In less than a day, they would all learn just how wrong they were. The contracts were signed, the press release written. By this time tomorrow, Maya Phoenix would be revealed as the CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios and the new owner of Morrison Tech. But for now, I just smiled and excused myself to get a drink. Let them have their moment of superiority. Let them believe what they'd always believed about me. After all, revenge is an art form too. The family reunion dragged on into evening, each hour bringing a new opportunity for my relatives to remind me of my perceived failures. I kept checking my phone, watching as messages from my executive team confirmed that everything was in place for tomorrow's announcement. Press release approved by legal. New York Times exclusive secured. Board transition documents ready for signing. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunset over Diana's perfectly manicured garden. When my father approached, he held a glass of his favorite scotch, the same brand I had a case of in my office, though he didn't know that. Maya, he said, his voice carrying that perpetual note of disappointment, your mother and I have been talking. I braced myself. These conversations never ended well. Diana's new digital content division will need artists, he continued. Basic level stuff. Nothing too creative. But it would be steady work, benefits, a real salary. He emphasized real, as if what I did wasn't real work. She's willing to give you a chance, despite your limited business experience. I took a sip of my champagne to hide my smile. If he only knew that my company's annual revenue was nearly triple what Morrison Tech made in digital services. Thank you, Dad, but I'm okay with my freelance work. He sighed heavily. Maya, you're 32 years old. Don't you think it's time to stop playing around with drawings and join the real world? Look at your sister. She's made something of herself. Through the window's reflection, I could see Diana holding court among our relatives, probably sharing another story of her business triumphs. She'd always been good at that, making sure everyone knew exactly how successful she was. "I know you think art is just playing around," I said carefully, "but there's more to it than you realize." "Is there?" He gestured at my simple dress, my unassuming appearance, because from where I stand, all I see is wasted potential. You could have gone to Wharton, could have been part of Morrison Tech's legacy. Instead, you chose to throw it all away for what? Digital doodles. The words stung, even after all these years, even knowing what I knew. Actually, I started, almost ready to tell him everything, but my phone buzzed again. A message from my COO. "Morrison Tech board members all confirmed for tomorrow's 9 a.m. meeting. They have no idea what's coming." I swallowed my confession. Less than 12 hours. I could wait that long. "Actually what?" my father prompted. "Nothing," I said. "You're right. I made my choices." He shook his head and walked away, leaving me to watch the final rays of sun disappear behind the trees. Across the room, I heard Diana's laugh ring out again. "Maya's always been different," she was saying to our Aunt Patricia. "Some people just aren't cut out for real success. At least she's finally accepting the hand up we're offering." I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. In less than 14 hours, everything would change. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of subtle jabs and condescending offers of help. Cousin James offered to teach me basic business accounting. Aunt Patricia suggested her daughter could help me build a proper website for my little art business. Even my mother got in on it, quietly showing me job listings for graphic design positions at local marketing firms. Through it all, I maintained my facade of quiet resignation, playing the role of the struggling artist they all expected me to be. But inside, I was counting down the hours. Finally, as the party wound down, Diana cornered me by the coat check. "I hope you'll seriously consider Dad's offer," she said, her voice dripping with folks' concern. "The position wouldn't be anything too challenging. Just basic artwork for corporate presentations, employee handbooks, that sort of thing. We'd start you at an entry-level salary, of course, but it's better than whatever you're making now." I thought about my penthouse office overlooking Central Park, about the team of over 200 artists and animators who worked for me, about the groundbreaking projects we were developing that would revolutionize digital animation. "I'll think about it," I said. "Don't think too long," she advised. "Once we announce our expansion into digital content next week, we'll have plenty of qualified applicants. I'm only offering because you're family." I nodded, accepting my cope from the attendant. "Speaking of announcements, will you be at the office tomorrow?" "Of course," she said proudly. 9 a.m. sharp. We have a major meeting with our mystery buyers. Some big animation studio is interested in partnering with us. She smirked. "See what happens when you think bigger than just drawing pictures." "Good luck with the meeting," I said, turning to leave. "Maya," she called after me. "That outfit you're wearing, if you do decide to take the job, you'll need to dress more professionally. Appearance matters in the corporate world." I looked down at my intentionally modest dress, thinking of the closet full of designer clothes waiting at home. I'll keep that in mind. Driving home, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what was about to happen. 10 years of hiding my success, of letting them believe I was a failure, all leading to this moment. Back in my penthouse, I hung up my struggling artist costume and changed into silk pajamas that cost more than Diana's precious Oscar de la Renta dress. My real laptop, not the prop I took to family functions, was open on my desk, displaying the final acquisition documents for Morrison Tech. A message popped up from my assistant. Everything set for tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 8:30 a.m. The Morrison Tech board doesn't know you're attending the meeting. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the same brand my father had been drinking, and walked out onto my terrace. The city lights sparkled below, a canvas of electric stars. Somewhere out there, Diana was probably still basking in her imagined triumph, telling her husband about her plans to give her struggling artist sister a chance at a real career. My phone rang, the private line only my executive team had access to. It was Marcus, my COO. "Maya," he said when I answered, "just wanted to confirm you're ready for tomorrow. Once we make the announcement, everything changes. Your family? They'll finally see the truth," I finished. "All of it. Are you sure you want to do it this way? We could send someone else to the meeting. Keep your identity private a little longer." I thought about my father's disappointment, Diana's condescension, all the years of being treated as less than because I chose art over their version of success. "No," I said firmly. "I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize who they're really dealing with." After hanging up, I stayed on the terrace for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing offer of help, every family gathering where I'd had to bite my tongue, it had all led to this moment. Tomorrow, they would learn that the daughter they dismissed as a failure had built something bigger than they could imagine. Tomorrow, they would understand that success doesn't always look the way they think it should. Tomorrow, Maya the struggling artist would be revealed as Maya Phoenix, CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios and the new owner of Morrison Tech. I smiled, raising my glass to the city lights. The art of deception was about to become a masterpiece of revelation. The Morrison Tech boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits, all mahogany and leather, old money and older pride. I stood in the private elevator, wearing a custom camel suit that cost more than 6 months of the entry-level salary Diana had condescendingly offered me. "Ready, Miss Phoenix?" Marcus asked beside me. We'd worked together since the beginning, when Dreamscape was just 3 people in my apartment. I checked my reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. Gone was the carefully cultivated image of the struggling artist. Today, I looked every inch the CEO I truly was. "Ready?" I confirmed, just as the elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Diana was already in the boardroom, speaking animatedly to the other board members. My father sat at the head of the table, looking imperial in his custom suit. Neither of them noticed me at first, too busy discussing their plans for the future. A future they didn't realize was about to change dramatically. "The Dreamscape representatives should be here any minute," Diana was saying. "Once we finalize this partnership, Morrison Tech will dominate the digital content space." "Actually," I said, stepping into the room, "there's been a slight change of plans." The room fell silent. Diana's mouth dropped open, her professional composure cracking for the first time I could remember. "Maya?" My father stood up, confusion evident on his face. "What are you doing here?" "This is a private board meeting." I smiled, placing my briefcase on the table. "I know exactly what this meeting is. In fact, I called it." "This is ridiculous," Diana snapped, recovering her voice. "Security." "Won't be necessary," Marcus said smoothly, stepping forward. "Miss Phoenix has every right to be here." "Phoenix," Diana's eyes narrowed. Her name is Morrison. Actually, I said, opening my briefcase and beginning to distribute documents. Maya Phoenix is my professional name. The name I use to build Dreamscape Animation Studios from the ground up. The name that's about to become very familiar to everyone in this room. The blood drained from my father's face as he looked down at the documents I placed in front of him. Acquisition papers, final sale contracts, press releases ready to go. This is impossible, he whispered. Is it? I took my place at the opposite end of the table. Let me tell you a story about a girl who loved art and business equally. Who took night classes in business administration while attending art school. Who saw an opportunity in the market for high-quality corporate animation and built a company that now grosses over $100 million annually. Diana was frantically flipping through the papers, her hands shaking. You're Maya Phoenix, the CEO of Dreamscape? The same, I confirmed. The company you've been trying to partner with, it's mine, has been since I founded it 10 years ago, right around the time you all decided I was throwing my life away. But you're just an artist, Diana stammered. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a Honda. I couldn't help but laugh. I own the building where that tiny apartment is located. The Honda is just what I drive to family functions. Would you have preferred I showed up in my Porsche? Given you one more thing to assume I couldn't afford. My father was still staring at the documents, particularly the page showing Dreamscape's current market valuation. All this time, he murmured. All this time, I agreed. Every family gathering where you mocked my career choice. Every condescending offer of help. Every comparison to Diana's real success. I was building something bigger than Morrison Tech could ever dream of being. Why? Diana demanded. Why hide it? Why let us think? Because you never would have accepted it. I cut her off. You would have tried to take control, to make it part of the Morrison Tech empire. You would have turned my vision into just another division of your company. I needed to build this my way, on my own terms. I stood up, smoothing my designer suit. And now, as of 9 a.m. this morning, Dreamscape Animation Studios is the proud owner of Morrison Tech. We'll be restructuring the company, focusing on innovation rather than tradition. Diana, your position as CEO will be eliminated, though you're welcome to interview for a role in our creative department. Father, you'll be transitioned to an advisory role until your retirement next month. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the other board members, who usually deferred to my father in everything, sat in stunned silence. You can't do this, Diana finally whispered. Actually, I can and I have. The board approved the sale last week, though they didn't know I was the buyer. The contracts are signed. The press release goes out in, I checked my watch, approximately 10 minutes. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. The New York Times exclusive was live. Art meets tech. Dreamscape Animation Studios acquires Morrison Tech in surprise deal. CEO Maya Phoenix reveals plans for digital innovation. I turned my phone around, showing them the headline. By the way, Diana, about that entry-level position you offered me yesterday, I'll have to decline. I'm afraid I'm overqualified. The next hour was a blur of legal formalities, shell-shocked board members signing transition documents, and my father sitting in stunned silence at the head of the table that was no longer his to command. As the board members filed out, leaving just my family, Diana finally found her voice again. All these years, she said, her voice hollow, You let us believe you were struggling. You let us pity you. No, I corrected her. You chose to pity me. You chose to see what you expected to see. The failed artist, the family disappointment. You never once considered that I might be capable of more. My father stood up slowly, looking older than I had ever seen him. Mina, save it, I said, but not unkindly. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it because it was the right business decision. Dreamscape needs Morrison Tech's infrastructure to expand, and Morrison Tech needs our innovation to survive in the modern market. I gathered my things, preparing to leave. There will be a family dinner tonight at Le Bernardin to formally announce the merger. I trust you'll both be there. They nodded mutely. Good. Oh, and Diana? I paused at the door. To dress professionally. Appearance matters in the corporate world, after all. The ride back to my office was quiet. Marcus knew me well enough to let me process everything in silence. It wasn't until we were in my penthouse office, overlooking the city, that he spoke. Feel good? I looked out at the city, thinking about the path that had led me here. It feels right, like finally finishing a painting I've been working on for 10 years. My phone was flooding with messages. Relatives who had suddenly seen the news, who were just now discovering that the struggling artist they'd dismissed was actually one of the most successful CEOs in the digital media space. Cousin James, who had offered to teach me basic accounting, had already sent 3 messages asking if we could discuss potential synergies with his hedge fund. Aunt Patricia, who'd suggested her daughter help me build a website, was calling repeatedly. Even my mother had texted, "Why didn't you tell us?" I left them all unanswered. They'd have their chance to talk at dinner tonight. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working on the speech I would give to Morrison Tech's employees tomorrow. They needed to know that while leadership was changing, their jobs were secure, as long as they were willing to embrace innovation and creativity. A final message came through from Diana. I need to understand. Please, can we talk before dinner? I thought about it for a long moment before replying. Come by my office, the real one. Top floor of the Phoenix building on 5th Avenue. The security desk will be expecting you. An hour later, Diana stood in my office, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted around the space, taking in the original artwork on the walls, the view of Central Park, the clear evidence of success she'd never noticed before. Why? She asked simply. Why what? Why did I hide my success? Why did I buy Morrison Tech? Why did I let you all believe I was a failure? All of it. I gestured for her to sit, because you and Dad never would have accepted my success on my terms. You would have tried to make it fit your definition of achievement. Board meetings, quarterly reports, traditional corporate structure. But Dreamscape succeeded precisely because it wasn't traditional. We innovate. We create. We do things differently. But we're family, she protested. We could have helped. Like you helped yesterday. I raised an eyebrow, offering me an entry-level position out of pity. That's not help, Diana. That's control. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I never knew, never even suspected, because you never looked. None of you did. You saw what you expected to see, the artistic sister who couldn't cut it in the real world. You never considered that art and business might not be mutually exclusive. Diana was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city view. What happens now? Now we move forward. Morrison Tech becomes part of Dreamscape, and we build something new together. If you're willing to learn, to adapt, there could be a place for you here. But not as CEO. Not anymore. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're not just my little sister anymore, are you? I never was just your little sister, I corrected her. You just never saw who I really was. That evening, as I stood addressing our extended family at Le Bernardin, I saw something I'd never seen before in their eyes. Respect. Not pity, not condescension, but genuine respect. To new beginnings, I raised my glass, and to the art of success. Later that night, back in my penthouse, I opened my old sketchbook, the one I'd carried through art school, filled with the early concepts that would become Dreamscape's first projects. On the final page, I'd written a quote that had guided me through all these years. The greatest art lies in hiding your mastery until the perfect moment of revelation. I smiled, closing the book. My masterpiece was finally complete. The sound of expensive cutlery scraping against fine china filled the dining room of my family's mansion as I pushed my food around my plate, trying to tune out my sister Olivia's latest speech about her corporate achievements. And then she announced, swirling her red wine, the board unanimously approved my proposal for the Asian expansion. We're projecting a 30% increase in revenue by next quarter. I glanced at my parents, watching their faces glow with pride. Dad, CEO of Blake Industries, nodded approvingly while Mom reached over to squeeze Olivia's hand. This was our traditional Christmas dinner, a celebration of the family business and its rising star. What about you, Sophie? Mom turned to me, her smile fading slightly. Still working on that. What do you call it? Nexus Technologies, I supplied, straightening in my chair. And yes, we're actually. Her little startup, Olivia interrupted with a laugh. What is it now? 2 years? And still working out of that tiny office downtown? I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to correct her. The tiny office was just a front. What my family didn't know was that Nexus Technologies had quietly become one of the fastest-growing software companies in the country. We operated under various shell companies, our true ownership hidden behind layers of corporate structuring. Someone has to try something new, I said carefully. Not everyone wants to work for the family business. Dad set down his fork, his expression hardening. The family business that put you through Stanford? That paid for your MBA? That same business you turned your back on? I didn't turn my back on anything, I replied. I chose to build something of my own. Build? Olivia snorted. Sophie, let's be honest. You're playing entrepreneur while the rest of us do real work. Blake Industries is a Fortune 500 company. We're about to launch the biggest expansion in our history. What have you built? If they only knew. While they've been focused on their traditional manufacturing business, I developed an AI-driven supply chain management system that was revolutionizing the industry. Major corporations were already using our software, including several of Blake Industries' competitors. I'm doing fine, I said simply, taking a sip of wine. Fine isn't the Blake standard, Mom chimed in. Look at Olivia, youngest VP in company history, featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. We just want you to live up to your potential, darling. I thought about the email I'd received that morning, an offer from a major tech company to acquire Nexus for $2.8 billion. I turned it down. My plans were much bigger than that. Speaking of potential, Olivia continued, the expansion project needs additional funding. Dad, have you considered approaching Morgan Stanley? Their tech division has been very aggressive lately. I hid my smile behind my wine glass. I knew exactly why Morgan Stanley was suddenly interested in manufacturing technology. they'd been trying to get a meeting with Nexus's mysterious CEO for months. Actually, Dad replied, we're exploring several options. The market's tighter than we expected, but Blake Industries' reputation speaks for itself. What they didn't know was that their reputation wasn't enough anymore. The manufacturing sector was changing rapidly, and companies that didn't adapt to new technology were being left behind. I'd seen their financials, not as the daughter they dismissed, but as the secret owner of a significant portion of their stock. Have you considered private equity? I asked innocently. I hear Phoenix Capital is looking for manufacturing investments. Olivia rolled her eyes. Please don't try to give business advice, Sophie. Phoenix Capital doesn't even take meetings with companies our size. They're way out of our league. I nodded thoughtfully, not mentioning that I'd had dinner with Phoenix Capital's CEO last week. Being underestimated had its advantages. Well, Mom stood up, smoothing her expensive dress. Shall we move to the living room for dessert? Sophie, help me with the dishes. In the kitchen, Mom busied herself with coffee cups while I loaded the dishwasher, a task Olivia was apparently too important to handle. Honey, Mom said softly, I know you think you're proving something with this startup business, but it's time to be realistic. There's always a place for you at Blake Industries. I straightened up, meeting her eyes. I am being realistic, Mom. More realistic than you know. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my CFO. Asian investors confirmed. Ready to proceed with phase 2. I typed back quickly. Green light. Start buying tomorrow. Work? Mom asked disapprovingly. On Christmas? Something like that, I replied, pocketing my phone. The market never sleeps. Back in the living room, Olivia was holding court again, detailing her plans for Blake Industries' future. I settled into an armchair, half listening as she outlined initiatives I knew would never materialize. Their company was already in trouble, though they didn't realize it yet. By this time next year, she declared, we'll have offices in Singapore, Shanghai, and Seoul. The Blake name will be global. Assuming the funding comes through, I murmured. What was that? Dad asked sharply. Nothing, I smiled, just thinking out loud. Later that night, in my penthouse apartment, not the small downtown office my family thought I lived above, I reviewed the latest reports from my team. Nexus had already secretly acquired 43% of Blake Industries' stock through various subsidiaries. Tomorrow's buying spree would put us over 51%. My phone lit up with another text, this time from my assistant. Board meeting scheduled for next week. All major shareholders will be present. Perfect, I replied. Time to introduce the real CEO of Nexus Technologies. I walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was probably still congratulating themselves on their business acumen, still pitying their failure of a daughter who couldn't cut it in the real corporate world. In 1 week, they would learn how wrong they'd been. In 1 week, they would discover that the daughter they dismissed had built something far bigger than they could imagine. In 1 week, everything would change. I poured myself a glass of the same expensive wine we'd had at dinner, but this time, I allowed myself to smile. Let them laugh. Let them mock my pathetic startup. Their reaction when they discovered the truth would be worth every condescending comment, every dismissive glance, every family dinner spent biting my tongue. After all, revenge is a dish best served with a controlling interest. The week after Christmas passed in a blur of stealth acquisitions and strategic meetings. From my real office, the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper. I watched as Nexus Technologies systematically gained control of Blake Industries through carefully orchestrated stock purchases. We've crossed the threshold, my CFO, Michael, announced during our morning briefing. 51.3% ownership as of market close yesterday. Blake Industries is effectively ours. I nodded, studying the real-time stock ticker on my wall. Blake Industries' share price had been declining steadily, a fact my family seemed determined to ignore. Their outdated manufacturing processes and resistance to technological innovation had left them vulnerable. What's the status of their funding search? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Desperate, Michael smiled. Every major bank has turned them down. Morgan Stanley won't even take their calls anymore. They've scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. Family dinner tonight. Mandatory. Dad's orders. I smiled, knowing exactly why this dinner had been called. They needed to discuss the company's financial crisis, but they were too proud to do it anywhere but behind closed doors. Time to prepare for the final act, I told Michael. Make sure all our documentation is ready for tomorrow's board meeting. That evening, I arrived at my parents' mansion to find the atmosphere considerably different from Christmas dinner. Gone were the celebratory wines and smug speeches about expansion. Instead, tension hung heavy in the air as we gathered around the dining table. The situation, Dad began without preamble, is more challenging than we anticipated. Several key investors have expressed concerns about our technological infrastructure. Concerns? Olivia scoffed. They're being ridiculous. Our methods have worked for 40 years. I took a sip of water, watching them carefully. Maybe they're worried about competition from more innovative companies. Not you too, Olivia snapped. Just because you play with computers doesn't make you an expert on manufacturing. Actually, I set down my glass. I know quite a bit about modern manufacturing. For instance, did you know that automated supply chain management can reduce operational costs by up to 40%? That's exactly what we don't need, Dad interrupted. More tech talk. We need serious solutions. Like what? I asked innocently. Have you considered selling some shares to raise capital? Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Sell shares? This is a family company, is it? I pulled out my tablet. Because according to public records, ownership has been shifting significantly over the past few months. Olivia leaned forward, her face flushing. What are you talking about? Various investment groups have been quietly acquiring Blake Industries stock. As of today, the Blake family only controls about 30% of the company. Dad stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. That's impossible. I would know if someone was buying us out. Would you? I asked calmly. When was the last time you actually reviewed the shareholder registry? Or are you too busy dismissing technological innovation as unnecessary? How do you know all this? Olivia demanded. Because, I smiled, I've been watching very carefully. Tomorrow's board meeting should be quite interesting. You're not even on the board, Mom said dismissively. No, but Nexus Technologies' CEO is. As the majority shareholder, we're entitled to a seat. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me as understanding slowly dawned. Nexus Technologies? Dad whispered. That's your little startup? Not so little anymore, I replied. We're valued at $4.2 billion as of last quarter. And yes, we now own 51.3% of Blake Industries. Olivia's face had gone completely white. You're lying. That's impossible. I pulled up another document on my tablet and slid it across the table. Here's the complete shareholding structure. You'll notice the various shell companies and subsidiaries all lead back to one parent organization, Nexus Technologies. Why? Mom's voice cracked. Why would you do this to your own family? I didn't do anything to you, I said quietly. I built something revolutionary while you were all too busy mocking me to notice. The fact that I now control the company you thought was too good for me. That's just poetic justice. Dad found his voice, anger replacing shock. You think you can just walk in and take over? We'll fight this. With what resources? I stood up, straightening my jacket. Your company is hemorrhaging money. Your technology is outdated. The only thing keeping your stock price from completely collapsing is the fact that I've been buying it. Get out, Olivia hissed. Get out of this house. I picked up my tablet and headed for the door, pausing only briefly. I'll see you all at tomorrow's board meeting. Oh, and Olivia? About that Asian expansion you were so proud of. It's canceled. We have better plans for the company. As I drove away from the mansion, my phone exploded with messages from family members. I ignored them all except one. From my grandmother, who had always seen my potential. Show them what you've built, dear. It's time they learned what real success looks like. In my office later that night, I reviewed the presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. The plan was comprehensive. A complete technological overhaul of Blake Industries, integration with Nexus's advanced systems, and a new management structure. Michael appeared in my doorway. The board members have been notified of the ownership change. Most of them are anxious to meet the real CEO of Nexus Technologies. I'm sure they are, I smiled. Make sure security is ready tomorrow. I have a feeling my family won't take their demotion quietly. As I looked out over the city lights, I thought about all the family dinners where they dismissed my dreams, all the condescending comments about my little startup. Tomorrow, they would learn the truth about the empire I'd built in silence. And this was just the beginning. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and cold. I dressed with particular care. A custom-designed power suit that cost more than Olivia's entire wardrobe, though she'd never know it. Today wasn't just about taking control. It was about showing my family exactly who I'd become while they weren't watching. Blake Industries headquarters still bore my grandfather's original bronze plaque in the lobby. I ran my fingers across his name as I passed, wondering what he would think of today's events. He had been the true innovator in the family, before Dad turned the company into a monument to outdated thinking. Good morning, Miss Blake. The security guard nodded respectfully. He'd clearly been briefed about the new ownership structure. The boardroom was already tense when I arrived. 14 board members sat around the massive mahogany table, with Dad at the head, at least for the next few minutes. Olivia sat at his right hand, her face tight with barely controlled rage. Mom had apparently decided to attend as well, though she had no official role. Now that everyone's here, Dad began, his voice strained. We need to discuss. Actually, I interrupted, taking a seat directly opposite him. As majority shareholder, I'll be conducting this meeting. Michael entered with our legal team, distributing documents to each board member. The room fell silent as they read the first page. This is outrageous, Olivia finally exploded. You can't just walk in here and... I can and I am. I cut her off smoothly. Nexus Technologies now owns 51.3% of Blake Industries. My first act as majority shareholder is to restructure the board. Dad, Olivia, You'll find your resignation letters in those packets. Please sign them. I built this company. Dad slammed his fist on the table. No, I corrected him. Grandfather built this company. You inherited it and refused to let it evolve. Now it's bleeding money and losing market share to more innovative competitors. I nodded to Michael, who started the presentation. Charts and graphs appeared on the room's screens, showing Blake Industries' declining performance against market trends. In the past 5 years, I continued, your profit margins have dropped 40%. Your technology is obsolete. 3 major clients have already jumped ship to competitors using modern supply chain management systems, specifically, systems created by Nexus Technologies. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They'd known things were bad, but seeing the numbers laid bare was shocking. And you think you can fix this? Olivia sneered. With your computers and algorithms? I smiled, clicking to the next slide. We already have. Those same systems you've been mocking have revolutionized manufacturing logistics across the industry. Companies using our platform see an average 60% increase in efficiency, which is why our startup's value has surpassed Blake Industries by several $billion. Mom gasped audibly. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red. The choice is simple. I addressed the board. Sign the resignation letters and accept a generous severance package, or face a very public revelation about just how badly you've mismanaged this company. You would destroy your own family's reputation. Mom asked incredulously. You mean the family that never believed in me? That dismissed every achievement because it didn't fit your narrow definition of success. I stood up, commanding the room's attention. I'm not destroying anything. I'm saving this company from your outdated leadership. The board members were already signing the documents, eager to align themselves with the new power structure. They were business people, after all. They could see which way the wind was blowing. Dad stared at the resignation letter for a long moment before finally picking up his pen. I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this. Funny, I replied. I never thought my father would be too proud to see the future of his own industry. I guess we both had blind spots. As security arrived to escort them out, Olivia turned back for one last shot. You'll regret this. You have no idea how to run a real company. I laughed genuinely for the first time that day. My little startup is worth $4.2 billion. I've revolutionized an entire industry while you were playing corporate dress-up. I think I'll manage. After they left, I moved to the head of the table, my grandfather's old seat. Now, shall we discuss the real future of Blake Industries? The next few hours were a blur of strategic planning and reorganization. By the end of the day, Blake Industries had a new board, a new direction, and a new connection to the technological innovations that would save it. 1 week later, the business world was buzzing with the news. Techish Protevijiwi, REVAL's secret empire. Next U.S. technology CEO, Techi Skolentiorol, a FAMIOYBUSINES, Sophie Bielaki. The hidden Bilionair. I received exactly one message from my family. A handwritten note from my grandfather, who had been quietly watching from his retirement. You did what I always hoped someone would. You brought Blake Industries into the future. I'm proud of you, kid. The note now sits framed in my office, next to the original business plan for Nexus Technologies that my family had laughed at years ago. Every morning, I look at them both and remember that success doesn't always look like what others expect it to. 3 months later, Blake Industries' stock had doubled. Our integrated technology platform was revolutionizing the manufacturing sector, just as I'd predicted. The board members who had so quickly switched allegiance were now falling over themselves to praise my vision. Dad and Olivia eventually tried to reconcile, of course, once the company's success became impossible to ignore. I received elaborate apologies, explanations about how they'd only wanted what was best for me, invitations to family dinners where they promised things would be different. I declined them all. Instead, I sent a simple response. The time for family dinners is past. If you'd like to schedule a meeting, please contact my office. We can discuss your future roles in the company, starting at entry level, of course. Everyone needs to learn the basics of modern manufacturing. They never replied. Now, 1 year later, I sometimes drive past our old family mansion, remembering all those dinners where they dismissed my little startup. The house seems smaller somehow, less imposing. Or maybe I'm just seeing it through new eyes, the eyes of someone who built something bigger than they could imagine. Last week, a young intern asked me why I'd kept my company secret for so long, why I'd let my family underestimate me until I could take control. Sometimes, I told her, being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. People show their true nature when they think you're beneath them, and success is sweetest when no one sees it coming. She nodded thoughtfully, then asked one more question. Was it worth it? Giving up your family for success. I looked out my office window at the city below, at the empire I'd built while they were too busy mocking me to notice. I didn't give up anything, I replied. They gave up on me long ago. I just proved them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. And that, really, was better than any family dinner could ever be.